Can I play for you? What's your password? Still the same?
Good evening and welcome to the Littleton Board of Selectmen meeting for Monday, January 28th, 2019. I'll read the proposed agenda. At 6:30, we're conduct organization, pledge of allegiance, read mail, followed by department updates. We have the town clerk here to discuss new positions. Fire department, give an update on the ALS. 6:55 or thereabouts, public input, members' updates. 7 o'clock, joint meeting with the planning board to address a vacancy with the board appointment. 7:25, Littleton Station area study, also at the planning board, I'm assuming. 7:45, update on the Point, the proposed new hotel at the Point. 8 o'clock, Littleton Common Smart Sewer, opt-in, opt-out discussion with a presentation from our engineers, Weston and Sampson. 9 o'clock, continued discussion on the adult use marijuana retail process with some new information that we're in possession of. 9:10, we'll have an executive session. Perhaps, if we do have it, it'll be under Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21, subsection A2, to discuss negotiations with non-union personnel, followed by adjournment. So, with that, Madam Clerk, would you lead us in the pledge? Perfect timing, Chase.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Anthony, would you lead us through the mail, please?
Just one item tonight, Mr. Chairman. It's you've heard it before. It's worth repeating again. It's considering all the amount of work that our excellent staff here at Town Hall did with the annual town report and the website. At last week's MMA conference, Littleton was awarded first place in Category 2 for the annual town report. And on the website, we came in for Category 2 for a population of 15,000 to, 15,000 to, what's that, 49? Oh, no, I'm sorry, it's counted. 5,000 and 15,000 roughly. Littleton came in first there too, so it was a good weekend for the town and our employees that really made that possible. So it's, again, it was a fantastic job by the staff.
Okay. Yeah, terrific all around. And Anthony, we all know that you played a great role in promoting both of those projects and bringing attention to the town in a positive light for those terrific successes. I would like to actually interrupt our agenda. I apologize, should have mentioned this right at the beginning, but we were saddened over the past week with the passing of a great friend of Littleton, a longtime resident, former member of this board, Board of Selectmen, and the originator of numerous businesses throughout town, and a friend of all who knew him. Walter Barkus passed away at age 84, and I'd like to have the board take a moment of silence to recognize Walter. Okay. Anthony, do you, we are...
That was it for the
introducing
mail.
next?
The next,
Okay,
the next
yeah.
item is 2A. It's, there's two new positions that are being proposed, an assistant town clerk to help
Come forward, Madam
very
Clerk.
busy town clerk, and a part-time clerk to support the collector. So Diane and Deb Richards is here to answer any questions.
Good evening.
How are we doing?
Good.
So basically what we're proposing is two people in our office. Originally, we had one person, 30 hours, that was shared between the two of us. 15 hours in my office and 15 hours with Deb. And basically that person was more answering phones, doing some basic counter work, a little bit of opening mail for Debbie, did some dog licenses for me, and a little bit of basic stuff, really, for both of us. What we're looking now is, many years ago, we both had assistants, assistant town clerk and assistant tax collector. When Keith came here, the town government study had looked at changing that, and so they took away both the assistant town clerk and the assistant tax collector. And so in talking over with Bonnie, you know, and the positions that we have in our office, and we thought, now's the time to do it. Linda retired in December, as you all know. We talked about hours, we talked about people, we talked about what's going to be required to get the job done in both of our offices. And we understand that, you know, there's always a money crunch, there's always things that are going on, but if you look at the information that Bonnie sent, it's the net impact is going to be about $21,300 with the combined, the increase in the hours. So Deb is basically looking for, in her office, 19 hours a week. So, I'm sorry, 18 hours a week. So it's not benefit eligible. And she'll have somebody that's basically doing counter work for her. She doesn't need someone to input information into the system for her. She doesn't need anybody to pick up anything else other than that. So her person is basically doing what Linda was doing before, nothing more than that. What I'm looking for is a benefit eligible, 30 hours a week, somebody that can pick up everything that I've not been able to put into fruition, which is everything that the state is now requiring. And there's a lot more going on with the state. There's stuff that we have to do on the state system that can't be done on the town system any longer, and something, there's a lot of training that has to be done. And I don't have anybody that can pick up that, bring somebody up to speed on that. So my issue is that with an assistant town clerk, if I'm out sick, and it happened, beginning of the year, I was out sick for the entire week. We didn't have anybody that could, you know, sign anything. So I ended up coming in while I was sick, filling out documents, stamping things, and to be sure that, you know, the town was still operating. You know, for whatever reason, you know, I could walk out the door tonight and get hit by a car, and you have no town clerk, and somebody to pick up the slack. So we really shouldn't be in that position, to not have somebody that can step into my shoes. We should always be looking to the future, always be training somebody else who can do my job. You know, if I want to take a vacation, if I'm out sick, or if I have a personal day, or, you know, anything, there's somebody there that can do the job. And that's what we're looking to do, is those two positions. That's why we're here this evening.
All right. You make a strong case and arguably long overdue. I'll ask board members, any questions, comments? Clerk?
I don't have any questions about the assistant town clerk position. I mean, clearly, there needs to be a backup person in place for you. It's insane to me that you would have to come in to sign something when you were sick, and like you said, if you get hit by a car, we have no town clerk. That just doesn't make sense whatsoever, right? With respect to the assistant clerk to the collector, how do we arrive at the number of hours? Is it 19 or 18?
It could be either 18 or 19.
Okay.
I put 19 on there.
Okay. And how do we arrive at that number of hours, or?
It's just, just the help that I would need for the week.
Okay. I'm just curious, and will that be over 5 days? Will they be there?
It depends, I'm
Okay.
very flexible.
Okay.
It could be every day.
Okay.
It could be 2 days a week.
So there's not like a set number of hours? Okay. All right.
If I could just interject.
Sure.
Linda was working how many hours?
15.
For you, okay.
Right, for
So
the
it's an increase of
Okay.
3 hours, 3 or 4 hours, depending upon if it's 18 or
Okay.
19.
So it's going to fluctuate?
Yes.
Okay. All right, great. Thanks.
Of course, we did hear this proposal originally at the budget summit, but I think there was some question on the board as to whether or not Joe, weren't you inquiring as to how this had gone through the personnel process, or you had some question on that?
It was just a case, I think we can iron that out. It was all, that was just communications.
Okay.
So this board is notified that it's going through the process, and then we're not hearing it secondhand from,
Right.
you know, someone that walks in and says, oh yeah, you get a new position. So that's just a communication thing. Other than that, these positions are needed. Something I did talk to Diane about too, and thinking of the future, that her position is so important in the town that in the future, we should consider making that an appointed position, not an elected position. Because we need someone that's trained and knows what they're doing, because it's, over the years, you know, you can see what happened that week that you were sick. There's not someone there in the future, there could be a problem. But that's for another day.
Right. Chase, anything there?
My primary question, Diane, is how much closer does having an assistant town clerk get us to having the official posting locations of agendas and whatnot being online versus the bulletin?
So they are online.
Oh, I know they're online. What I'm interested in is the official posting location. I'd really like to get us at that point where the official posting location isn't a board out back that no one ever looks at. And I know that the concern in the past has been, well, it can be challenging sometimes to get things posted online. And if I understood your concerns correctly, they were that having online be the official posting location could put us,
So
could
here's
make
a
it more difficult sometimes.
So here's a couple of things. If we get somebody online, we get an assistant town clerk, and so a lot of things have changed in that my office has taken over doing all of the assignments of all the rooms, which was never my job, never my department's job. So that's become a burden, so that's part of it. I'm doing all of the updates of all of the agendas online, so that, again, this is one of the reasons why we do need an assistant. How long will it take to do that? The problem will be getting all of the boards and committees up to date. So here's the issue. They give it to me 48 hours in advance. We're now going to require boards and committees to give it to me 72 hours in advance, because there's no way with all the boards and committees that we have, you giving it to me 48 hours in advance to get everything uploaded in 48 hours. Because if that's what you want it online on the website as the official 48 hours in advance. When I only get it 48 hours in advance, there's no way that we're going to be able to get it online by 48 hours. So
I mean, I don't want to turn this
Yeah.
into a discussion
No,
just
no.
of that, but I
that's,
just don't
that's what we would
understand how.
love to. That's what we'd love to do by getting a. But all the boards and committees have to get on board. So that's where we have to go.
Okay.
By getting somebody extra in there, we have to first get all the boards and committees on board.
Okay.
But by having an extra person and an extra, that's one of the things that we're looking to do, is to take some of that burden off of me, give it to the assistant. They're able to do all of those things that I've been doing on my own all the time, and giving it to that next person.
So the assistant will be able to help you
Yes.
wrangle the boards and committees
Yes.
so that everybody's moving
Yes.
in the same direction.
Yes, and unfortunately, what's gonna happen is we first will go to the state, we'll first go to the town meeting, change it at town meeting,
Right.
and then we'll get it approved and all of that, and then get all the boards and committees on board, and then there's gonna be those one or two that are gonna say, we're gonna have to say, sorry, but your meeting's canceled because you didn't get it to us because we couldn't get it on. So it'll be a hard
Process
lesson to
change.
learn,
Change
but
process.
they'll process.
I'm good with that, as long as this gets us closer to being able to do that, whatever the process might be.
First step, getting you the reinforcements you need.
Yeah.
All right.
So my 2 cents is just that I see this very much as a shift in workforce. With Linda leaving, there's Debbie's looking for, the tax is looking for the same hours with a little bit of a bump up from, having the realization that those hours were needed, but weren't able to get them out of Linda. You can't, just couldn't get those hours out of her. With the much-needed void of an assistant town clerk, with, which was demonstrated with you being out, unfortunately, I see that as a necessity. What I would like to see, and I think they're both necessities, what I would like to see is, and maybe our next town administrator can impart some of this upon the departments, is some cross-training, so that on the occasions when the flu hits the second floor really bad, or something happens, that there are people that can step in. I know that you guys do kind of cover each other and do as much of that as possible, but the town clerk responsibilities are a little bit different, but for some of the other offices that are customer facing, I'd love to see some additional cross-training.
And the common thread usually seems to be the nexus is the access to the website, the internet. That seems to be as big a bottleneck as anything. We gotta figure out a way to have more people do that so everything doesn't land in Nancy's lap.
Yeah.
And same idea, you talk about scheduling rooms and things like that. It's important to me that the town clerk is doing the things that are statutorily required by the town clerk. Scheduling rooms, I don't think the legislature has put on your plate, and I appreciate that you're doing that. But if things need to be rearranged in a way that makes it more efficient, or at least the load shared.
Absolutely.
Happy to hear that.
Okay, well, you're very much on our radar screen as we enter the budget cycle, so thank you. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add?
One thing I would like, sorry, I interrupted you. One thing I would like to note here, I don't know if this is worth penning a letter to our legislative reps, but pointing out to them that, listen, we've had to now go hire an assistant town clerk because of a bunch of unfunded state mandates. And this will fall on deaf ears and then we'll throw it in the garbage can, but it is frustrating.
Go on record.
Yeah, go on record. I mean, how much time do you think you and your office spent on early voting? And I think that's a very worthwhile thing, but.
So we
Down
have.
here for a week last fall, right?
It's 10 days of early voting, and it's from the time my office opens in the morning until it closes, and then another 4 hours after all those 10 days, plus that weekend, the first weekend of the end of that day.
And you can't conduct it in your regular office, it has to be down
No, it has
here.
to be down here, and we've actually already closed off, we're taking over the multipurpose room already for 2020, for the early voting, because this will not hold it. There's no way that I can do early voting in this room, because it's just too small. So we've already blocked off that time frame for early voting in the multipurpose room. And we're hoping, that it's gonna be big enough. It's crazy, and they're talking, possibly expanding it, so not just state level.
So, I would very much favor the Board of Selectmen, through the TA's office, probably putting together a letter to our reps saying, hey, guys, you want to see, you come up with these mandates, and some of them are good and worthwhile, but they have legitimate impacts on our bottom line.
I'd support that too. I think we just need to put as many detailed, if you can come up with,
A draft even.
yeah. Go on, Anthony, work with
Could co-author it even.
Diane and Chase and see volunteer the subject.
Yeah, right. I'd be happy to.
Board okay
to
with
help
that?
with
Yeah, all right.
I'll be in touch with you, Diane, about specifics.
So we've got a proposed motion in front of us. Do we want to take a motion so that Diane and Deb can move forward with this? They can't do anything until they get the blessing from us, essentially.
Right by it, yes. Okay, why don't you, whoever wants to grab it, Chuck, you, Madam Clerk?
Certainly. Move that the Board of Selectmen approve the position of Assistant Town Clerk, benefit eligible 30 hours per week, and a part-time clerk for the Collector's Office, non-benefit eligible up to 15 hours per week.
Before we second that,
That's,
do we want to amend that hours per week?
Oh, up to 19?
Yeah.
Okay.
Duly noted. So second on the,
Second.
okay, the motion's been made by Selectman Napoli, seconded by, well, it sounded like a
Mr. Knox.
Selectman Knox, okay.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? You guys have it. And additional follow-up is to work on that letter as discussed by Selectman Gerbic. Thank you.
thank you all.
Thank you.
All right. Next item, Chief Wazinski, think Deputy Chief is out there somewhere too, Clancy. I don't know who else is involved in this.
Just tell me what his slides. Just tell me when you want to see the next slide.
Just heard from a department on advanced life support, and now we gonna hear your solutions.
Little supplement, it's a little easier.
These are the ones that are in here, yeah.
And then the black sheet.
Thank you. Oh, there's multiple lines on that sheet?
Thank you. Two.
All right. So just a brief overview of the, update of the ALS program. We're just over a year now through the process. Last January, we hired the medics, got them on board. February through April, we purchased our ALS equipment, outfitted the both ambulances. In May, our paramedics went to the fire academy. We submitted our ALS licensure, our application, excuse me, and completed the retrofit of the ambulances, basically cabinetry, things like that for the ALS equipment. And that was in May. And then in July, Coastal, which is our billing company, they took over the billing, which was one of our larger issues. So they took over the billing in July 1st, and then we also received our license to go ALS in July. And then our paramedics also had graduated the fire academy, and we were able to start the service up mid-July, and in August, we were fully operational with paramedic on every shift. This is just a brief overview on our setup of the department. Deputy is under me, and then we have 4 shifts, lieutenant on each shift with 3 firefighters, of which there's paramedics on each shift. And then down at the bottom, we have the call department set up, where there's a on-call captain, 2 captains, 2 lieutenants, and then 10 firefighters under each group. And then up in the tan is the volunteer corps, the MRC or the CERT team, which is about 17 active in that group right now. One of our larger issues that we talked about as we were bringing the ALS program forward was our response times and how we brought how ALS was brought to the town. And when we're at medicals, we'd have to wait for the paramedics, which were coming from a significant distance in the past. And our averages were 8 to 9 minutes. Sometimes they went up to 15, 16 minutes. And that was unacceptable waiting. So that was one of the drivers to go ALS to bring the service to our town and run it, not only to improve the service to the citizens, but to bring that much quicker. And our average response now is 3 to 4 minutes, and that's getting ALS to the doorstep and starting on arrival.
Could you help me understand where those times start and stop? So the 3 to 4 minutes versus the 8 to 9 minutes, what those are actually measured? I think you started to allude to it.
So it was on averages. The average response times.
Between when the call comes in and when?
Yep, from response, the initial tone out, when we're alerted that there's a call.
Okay.
To our arrival on scene.
Okay. And the 8 to 9 minutes then we're on scene with, prior to implementing the ALS.
We would always be on scene in that 3 to 4 minutes, but there was no ALS, that advanced life support until that 8 to 9 minutes, where somebody could put you on a cardiac monitor, start to administer medications, things like that.
And that's
So-
where mutual aid was coming in, or we were transporting someone to meet up with.
To meet up with ALS, correct, right. And now we can, on arrival, we're bringing that service right inside, doing it in their home, and starting that process right away, where we can make those decisions. Say we have a critical cardiac patient that needs to go to the cath lab. They can see that on the monitors right away, instead of
getting halfway to a facility, realizing, hey, we need to change direction once we actually met up with the paramedics. So that's kind of the difference just in the colors of the lines. But our average now is the 3 to 4. There are a few, longer times there where our second ambulance is going out and we're actually meeting up with our ALS truck who's clearing the hospital and intercept with our own crews.
What, going back to that, sorry, Chief, I'm interrupting.
No, go right ahead.
Presentation multiple times. What's the vertical axis there, the numbers? So
We based it off of 200 random runs that we pulled out since July.
okay, so you pulled out 200 random runs since July and 200 random runs prior to
Previously,
July.
correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Does the gray represent for ALS, the ones that, looks like there's some that go to 18 minutes, is that?
That's correct. That was when we were waiting for ALS to come from Lincoln. They were based out of, so we had some extended responses. Part of the time they were based out of Acton, and where our shorter responses were received, and then on different occasions, they were based out of, or their response was out of Lincoln, and in many cases, they were canceled. So just simply because our arrival, or we'd be meeting up with them at the Rotary, going to Emerson Hospital, and at that point, it's not worth meeting up with ALS and stopping when we can arrive to the hospital
Wasted
in another
time.
minute and a half. On this slide, so this is an overview from when we started in July. ALS emergencies, there were 114, which 114 advanced life support medicals. The ALS 2 level, which is at a point where you can give additional medications. It's a more in-depth call. There were 2 serious potential trauma calls, I guess you could call it. Air ALS to Littleton. So that was in the July to the beginning of August when we were actually up and running. Air and Westford covered us instead of us calling Pro because our contract had ended with Pro on July 1st. So Air and Westford covered us for that time period. And so they covered 9 medicals there. On our BLS calls, there were 126. And then we did go to Air since we've started the ALS service. That was a call. And then same with Westford. We go to Westford back and forth a bit more frequently. And then same on the bottom. That was the services that Westford provided to us with a total of 265 medicals.
And this is the summary from July 1st to January 1st?
Correct. Yep. So on this, obviously it's a little bit hard to read on the screen, but you have the handout that I just passed around.
Yep.
If you could look at the FY19 side. So the very top line, that indicates the revenues that are coming into the ambulance account right now. And then the dip in it is the yearly offset. That's the budget offset, so July 1st, that's when the funds are drawn out of that to offset the revenues, or offset our budget, excuse me. Going across the first line, that's basically, those are the same numbers that are up on the very top, all right? The numbers that are in the account, and then below that is the ambulance revenues. So those are the actual revenues that came in. So July through December, those are actual revenues. The first 3 months, they're a bit on the lower side. That was when our services had ended with Pro and had begun with Coastal. We weren't exactly, there wasn't a clear picture of the revenues that were coming in from Pro. And that was one of the reasons why those revenues are a bit lower. So since Coastal has taken over, October, November, and December, that's starting to give us a better picture of revenues, of what they should look like. It takes about 60 to 90 days from the time we go out on a call to actually start to receive those revenues. By the time bills are sent out, sometimes it goes to the patient, and then they forward it to the insurance company, our insurances change, or different insurances cover different portions of it. So, I mean, ultimately, it could take as long as 120 days if there were technical difficulties with the insurance, or if somebody, which very frequently happens, people don't pay attention to the first one when it comes, they wait for the second one to come. So it just, there's so many working components to actually collecting the revenues. As you go out under the ambulance revenue, we took those first 6 months and just did the average, and averaged out about $45,000 running forward, so. And then just.
And what was the estimate originally when this program was conceived?
I believe we're around 43 to 45.
Okay.
We ran very conservative numbers, and one thing to remember is the program was never meant to make money, but to break even and to supply a better service to the town. You know, it really improving the response times and the quality of service. So when you look at the revolving account balance, and that's basically the same as what's on top, a month behind. And then operational expenses down below, that goes right across. Paramedic salaries and wages. You can see the first 3 months were, well, the 6 months on salaries and wages, those are actual numbers. And then below that, we included the lieutenant's promotions, because this was all part of that process of this program, splitting up the groups, having rank. And then software charges, uniforms, billing. Some of the billing costs initially were rather low, and that was while we were waiting for revenues to actually start coming in. There weren't anything, it took about 3 months for substantial revenues to start coming in, where the billing charges had started to raise. And then below that is the fringe for medics, the 6 medics. And below that is the salaries and fringe for the 2 dispatchers. So 2 of those, the last 2 dispatchers are also funded through this program. And, you know, that's part of the enhanced 911 system. So that when they receive the 911 calls, they're staying on the phone the whole time until an emergency responder arrives on scene. And they'll talk them through and give us the updates. And then the total operational expenses across the bottom. So the total operational costs for this were $784,297. And the budget offset, where you see in the very top, the dip on the graph, was the $585,916. And so as that continues on for the next few years, there's a significant amount in the pot, per se, and it'll sustain itself as the revenues come in, and it'll just, you know, continue, and so that we can withdraw, and there'll still be funds in there. We also have the ability to change that offset if we notice it slightly different. Seeing only that there's the first 6 months, it trended a little bit low in the first 3, and then picked up to a decent rate on the second 3 for the calendar year. Going forward, those numbers will only continue to increase. As we trend these numbers and we go from January to July, it should be a steady increase. Reviewing some of the numbers already for January, it's even, you know, better than December. So we're pretty confident about that. And so I would say by July, we'll be able to paint a much better picture, eliminating some of the projections and coming in with the hard numbers.
Chief, can you help me understand the variability in the paramedic salaries and wages? I mean, we go from a low in September of 21,000 to a high of 36,000. So we're looking at 70% difference in back-to-back months. Why the variability there?
On the salaries?
Yeah.
And
Given that that's your biggest operational cost.
it's simply overtime. As they're working in overtime, covering other shifts, That's where that comes from. And I actually, back up a little bit, that's also the month where the new contract kicks in. So rates had changed, and we also had to pay retro back from July 1st in that month, and that's where it all kicked in.
So October captures the retroactive.
Correct, back to July.
So you would say July, August, and September, those line items don't represent the full cost of those salaries and wages?
Correct. So-
That 585 offset, I think we had kind of anticipated up to 600,000.
We did.
That was the number we were targeting.
Correct. And with the funds that were already in the account, we were able to drop that down, and it actually extended it out until roughly 2023, 24. It'll blend. It'll all break even, and that's kind of where this will all go away and absorb the cost with it, the cost of the program.
Self-sustaining.
Yep. All right, I need to look at the sheet on my own because I can't see that. So this is the profit loss comparisons. And when you look through 18, this was when we were operating under pro. And then on the bottom section, 19, those are the actuals, or where we are now. So for the first 6 months, left side was the projected, the center column going down are the actual revenues that came in. And you can see in the first 3 months, July, August, and September, where the revenues were a little bit lower, simply from that transition and unable to clearly see funds that were being able to be recouped or not. One of the nice things now about being with Coastal, they're very transparent. We see all of the revenues as they're deposited daily into the accounts, and then with Steve Annuity, at the end of every month, we're comparing all of our notes, making sure that all the numbers match up. So we actually get to see all of the funds as they're deposited into the accounts now, where we were never able to see that in the past.
With Pro.
So I think that'll be a big difference. And then, so you can see, like on the right column, just our profit or loss comparison for that. And again, going forward, these trends will only increase in revenue.
I'm just struck by how the numbers match, at least as I remember, the projections and then the feedback on service, additional services, just all positive. But there's got to be something that you didn't anticipate or that you need to modify. So where were the unexpecteds? Anywhere yet, or are we still working this out?
It's constant work. We are improving things with the crews. They improve how they write their reports, information that's included, that all revolves around the
Does the staffing schedule
building.
match when the calls are coming in? Is that working?
The staffing, it is. It's, some days are a little more of a challenge than others to make sure, but we have a paramedic on every shift, so that doesn't go on staff. We're starting to do a little bit more mutual aid, and so that, there could be some additional responses in the run volume that were unanticipated in the past, but some of the...
Yeah, do we have neighboring towns that do not have ALS that are now leaning on us? I mean, it's fine if they do, but...
Right now, we respond mostly to Westford. They
Yep.
have ALS, but their run volume is through the roof, and they run 3 ambulances, and we still support them.
Wow, terrific.
So it's, I think in time, we will eventually start to run to those neighboring communities a little bit more. But the ones that don't have ALS right now are Groton, Boxborough, and Harvard.
Mhm.
So.
If I can,
Sure. Case.
Anthony, can you flip back to that profit loss chart? The column the bottom data there, it's listed as profit loss. Is that really profit loss, or is that just the differential relative to the projected? Because
It's differential.
okay, so if I read this correctly, in November, or I'm sorry, right, in October, the program actually lost $32,000 as a general fund subsidy, right?
10,000.
When I'm looking at this, I see, in October, I see $40,000 of revenue and $72,000 of operational costs. So that would be a general fund subsidy for that month of $32,000, right?
Yes, because that also includes the dispatchers.
I understand
Yes.
that, but every month is showing some general
Yep.
fund subsidy.
Right,
Okay.
that's right.
Any closing or follow-up commentary?
We're pretty happy with the program and the change of the department. We're, constantly working to improve the services that we provide to the town, and
How about the new hires?
I
We
think this
get
is-
longevity out of these folks? We hope.
we've had some rotation already.
Already, yep.
And we have another one that should be starting with us in the next 2 weeks, which we'll be bringing forward for a meet. And right now, we have a pretty good bunch of guys, and knock on wood, and we're hoping for some longevity out of this. Yeah.
Good. All right, members?
I'm all set.
I think the chief is doing exactly what we've asked him to do, but I think the Board of Selectmen needs to look at how we're asking him to account for these things. Because right now, we've got operational expenses that do not account for any of the running equipment costs associated with this program. So and I've said this before, I'm perfectly fine with the general fund subsidizing this. I think the taxpayers get what they should out of this program, but the fact of the matter is, what we've asked the chief to put together doesn't account for the full cost of this program, right? If all we're looking at are staffing costs, uniforms, billing, training, dispatchers, et cetera, and we're not looking at the next ambulance we need to support ALS, the equipment that we need to support ALS, so on and so forth, then we're not looking at a real cost.
True, but it is, for purposes of comparing to the previous system, it's following the same model in terms of financial. When we pulled out the cost for the old model, we weren't including those costs.
Correct.
So, as an apples-to-apples comparison, just to see where we stand versus the most recent alternative.
Sure,
This is-
and that's what I'm
Maybe
saying.
going forward, we don't want to keep that model, but that was, I think, useful.
I completely agree, and I think the chief and deputy have given us exactly what we've asked for in the past.
Right.
What I'm suggesting is going forward, I'd really like to understand the totality of the cost, which involves capitalizing, or annualizing, rather, the capital costs.
Okay, good point.
One thing that, just to kind of touch on that, with some of the way it's been done in the past, so the revenues would go into the account, and depending on the year, they would use those revenues to potentially purchase an ambulance, and that would clean it out. I think in changing to this model with the paramedic service and adding the 6 medics, that eliminated any of the other things, the capital items and things like that. And those funds were directed and put towards those members, including the 2 dispatchers, to just fund that to improve the service for the town. And it really kind of, per se, neutralized how it was
But
done before.
Over time, we may have more potentiality out of that fund, right?
That's correct, and we'll see as the run volume increases and.
But
the
again,
service-
we can't simply be relying on that revenue, because though the revenue goes into one bucket, there are more costs coming out of another bucket. So we can't
Understood.
simply look at the bucket that says, oh, look at all this revenue, never mind the fact that there's all these costs coming out of a different bucket. Because what we're looking at right now, and again, I want to harp on this, I don't object to the fact that the general fund is subsidizing this, but it is not a money maker.
No.
And it was never made to be a moneymaker.
I understand that. I want to
This was
show.
put out to improve the services to the community, and that does come at a cost. And it comes to comes at a cost for the community to have a better service supplied to the citizens at you know, at a higher level of care. And having the ability to show that we were able to, you know, break even, and that was the point, it was never painted
Well, all
the
right, well,
picture
maybe it's a
to
way
make money.
to wrap this up. I mean, I
Yep.
get your point, and I hope you're not
Right.
mistaken what Jason, but maybe the next time we get the information presented prior to the next budget cycle, whatever, which would include a full year's activity, right?
Correct. Yep.
Then maybe we incorporate the capitalization of full costs and we see where we're at. I mean, even if it
Right.
shows that we're investing out of the operational budget, I think people will be okay with that.
I'm
Yeah.
perfectly fine with that, I just want to know what it is.
Right.
I want to know what the totality
Understood.
of the costs
Yep.
are.
All right.
Good. Anything else?
Get off my soapbox.
No? Good stuff. Kept us away. Yeah. Joe, Chuck? Great. Thanks a lot, Chief.
All right, thank you.
You too, Dan.
Tom, how come you're so quiet tonight? Okay. We're a little behind our scheduled joint meeting with the planning board. We just wanted them to feel at home. So we could skip or we could defer the public input, members' updates, and get right into the meeting if members want to do that.
Yeah, that's fine with
Okay,
me.
we can do that, just respecting all your time. I see from my account of heads out there, we've got the 4 surviving members of the planning board, as well as 5 sturdy applicants. Yes, all right. With the resignation, I believe it was in December, from Jamie Cruz from the planning board, they're down a member, and the Mass General Law calls on us to, and we followed this process, published in our own regular bylaws too as well. We published the vacancy jointly, and got a great response, which is terrific. It's about an important position as we've got to appoint. And it is a joint appointment of the remaining members, so we have a total of 5 eligible selectmen voters, 4 planning board members. And we will conduct this meeting jointly. Myron dutifully has put together 5 good questions to draw out some of the interest and qualifications of our applicants. And I guess I just asked the chair if you're okay with the following process, Mark. Maybe we'll just, have each of the members in turn come up, make their presentation about who they are, why they're interested, and have them each go through the 5 questions. And then as each one's done, members of both boards can ask questions as see fit. And when we've run through all 5 of them, we can discuss internally how we want to go through the process of ranking them. I know we've had a suggestion in our board from someone about perhaps a process for grading candidates, but, that's entirely up to what we decide we want to do. But initially, we can get them up here and hear them out, right?
Yep, I think that's the first step, let's start
Okay.
there.
All right, at the end of the game, we have to end up with a motion, a second, and a roll call vote. Okay, cool. All right, did I miss anything, Anthony?
Nope, that's perfect.
What's that? Oh, yeah, you've opened your meeting, have you? Sure you did. Myron says yes, you did. All right. Okay, I'll take the candidates in the order that they are in our packet.
Which is alpha. Just
It's alphabetical, all right, so you've probably been getting that, Aaron, all your life, the advantage of being,
Nothing new.
last name B, first name A.
Double A doesn't help.
Yeah, well, why don't you come forward and, Aaron Byrne, introduce yourself there, take a seat, and then we'll, as I say, just introduce yourself to us, tell us a little bit about you and why you're interested, and then there are some questions which maybe we'll have board members take turns asking, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Okay. I'm Aaron. I've lived in town my whole life. Both my parents have. I do real estate now, and I just feel like I have a lot of insight into what the planning board does. It's always been something that's been of interest to me. I saw the posting online, and I figured what better time to try than now.
Terrific. Okay. All right. Then I'll ask any member to jump in. Mr. Knox, you want to jump in? Do you have the questions in front of you?
They're up on the screen.
Oh, they're up on the screen? Oh, well, they're all right. I guess, why don't one of us just read the questions?
Why don't you want them to do it?
Yeah.
It's there.
But do you guys generate them? Why don't you, one of you members ask the question, just so our audience can...
We can go back and forth, I'll take one and one of you
Sure,
guys take
okay,
two, right?
all right.
So, if appointed by the Board of Selectmen and the planning board, do you intend to run for the seat in May? Or are you proposing to serve as a caretaker until the town general election?
I plan to run in May.
Okay.
I'll jump in. Recently, the town approved and amended a senior residential development zoning bylaw. First of all, have you read it, and do you understand it? Do you agree with it?
I did read some of it. I have not read the complete thing, but yes, I do agree that there is need for additional senior living and such.
Planning board?
What role do you think the planning board has in realizing or implementing the town's master plan?
I think that the planning board has a lot to do with, hence the planning, of the master plan and implementing that and bringing it to the appropriate people.
What do you think our role is?
Planning of the future of the town and development of the town.
Someone with that, Joe?
Are there any potential conflicts of interest you might have while serving on the board, and if yes, what would they be?
None to my knowledge at this time.
Okay, great. Planning board, final.
What are your thoughts about current and future residential and commercial development in Littleton?
I see that there's a lot of potential, especially with the proposed master plan and stuff with the common and stuff like that. And the commercial development in Littleton, it's grown even a lot in the last 5 years that I've really been paying attention to it. And I think that the future's bright for the town as far as with the commercial and residential development as well.
Okay. I suggest we just go a little free form here. If there are any follow-up questions from any board member from either board, you want to jump in and ask a question that you don't think Aaron's covered, or a follow-up that you might have?
I'll lead off with a question. Aaron, you said that you're currently a Realtor.
Yes.
Would you find any conflict, you obviously, you sell in Littleton, do you work out of Littleton as your office here?
I work out of Westford with Keller Williams.
Okay, so that was my question. If somebody came to you and wanted you to represent a town, a commercial piece of property in Littleton, what do you feel you would have to do at that point as a member of the planning board?
I would definitely disclose that, one, and two, if it was something that I felt that I was, it's some kind of conflict of interest, I would definitely bring that to the attention and, either refer that client out to somebody else and not take on that if it was going to create some kind of conflict.
Any other board member questions? Okay, I assume you'll be available if somebody thinks of something after? Well, Mark, sure.
The board takes up a lot of our time. We meet the first Thursday of every month. We're also interacting with a lot of other boards and a lot of committees that are going on. Do you think you're going to have the time to put into meeting and offline, and as well as some of the other meetings that we're
Absolutely.
You don't think Thursdays are going to be a problem?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Well, hang around. We'll get back to you for follow-ups, but thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Aaron.
All right, next up, familiar face, Richard Crowley, please come forward. I assume you were paying attention there, Richard, you know the drill, so you can start off by telling folks, or reminding folks who you are, what you do, and what your interest is in the vacancy on the planning board.
Thank you, Chairman Glavy. My name's Richard Crowley, and I've been a resident here for over 40 years. And, I've been a planning board member for 10 of those 40 years. I stepped down last May because we're transitioning from work phase of life to retirement phase of life. And so we figured that it would be a good time to start folding up some things. Since then, I've seen so many things that are still left undone that I really wanted to see if I could complete on the planning board. And since I've just about fully transitioned to retirement, I think that, making the time for planning board or any of the other activities that go along with it would be perfect. It's the perfect time of my life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Then, why don't we have a selectman start off with the first question?
Sure, I'll start. If appointed by the Board of Selectmen and Planning Board, do you intend to run for the seat in May, or are you proposing to serve as a caretaker until the town election?
No, I think I'll run in May.
Okay.
Yeah. It's, I had the time, almost 9 months, to think about being off the planning board, and I'll tell you, I really miss it, and there's certain things that I really wanted to see would get done. Things like the zoning south of the train station, the industrial area that's really going nowhere. We could be using that for affordable housing for the town. I mean, we really need affordable housing. The senior, not supposed to call it a senior bylaw, but senior bylaw, really didn't make it all the way to giving us what we wanted for numbers of affordable housing. So maybe we could tweak that a little bit. Things like the common area. Boy, I was part of the group that developed that, the words that are in the zoning bylaw for the common area. And we still got, one of the things that we wanted to do, there were 3 different things that needed to happen. The sewering, the zoning we did back then, and to basically rezone it so that you take away the impediments to building that, to fixing things up there. Impediments like lot setbacks. And this new zoning that the board's looking at fits that right perfect. Yeah,
All right,
so.
seeing as how you've answered the next 2 in the line, I'm going to skip over to the 4th one. How's that?
Well, I think we ought to follow the same procedure anyway, Peter.
Maybe I got a little off track on that,
Okay,
but
all
it's,
right. I'll try to rein them in a little bit.
ahead.
better. All right.
rein me in next time.
All right. Do you want to ask the second question, Anna?
So, Richard, recently the town approved and amended a senior residential development zoning bylaw. Have you read it? Do you understand and agree with it?
Yes, I read it, and I agree with most of it, and I think it needs some more work. Yeah, we need to, it doesn't give us affordable housing. We need affordable housing. It gives us some, not as much as we need.
Okay. I will ask the next question then. What role do you think the planning board has in realizing, implementing the town's master plan?
Well, I think we have to partner with the master plan, because that's, they're eventually, they are working on zoning stuff right now. Eventually, it'll take our board to approve whatever takes place down there, or any place else in town.
Okay.
I think they should be our partner.
Peter, you wanted to ask the 4th question, did you?
Oh, you're so special. Are there any potential conflicts of interest you might have while serving on the board in your fields?
No.
What are they?
No, none.
Okay, all right. Chase, you want to know? Join in. Last question. Oh, sorry.
What are your thoughts about current and future residential and commercial development?
I think we need more affordable housing for residential. If we don't, then we're going to lose a generation of our kids, because there'll be no place for our kids to move, and there'll be no place for seniors to move. So that whole section of townspeople will disappear, because they won't be able to be here. For history, for all the way back to the beginning of Littleton, it's been families. We stand right now to lose the kids who grew up here in town because they can't afford to live here. That's a big deal. And if we don't keep those kids here, we're going to transition to a very different kind of town, where there's going to be extremely poor people and extremely rich people, and nobody in between. We can't let that happen. We have to find a way to get housing for the people that can afford the $300,000 or $400,000 homes. Right now, if you look in the paper, everything that sells in Littleton is over $600,000. Who can afford that? Our kids can't. So I think we need to work on a residential housing and the commercial development. We did, when I was on the planning board, we did a pretty good job of localizing commercial development over at the Point. Now, what a lot of people don't remember is that the Point was about to become the car-crushing capital of the world. I think some of you guys that were on the selectmen at the
Or a
time.
casino, that was another option.
That's right, yeah. And so with those
Soul
two.
crushing then.
With those two options, there, we fought to get Sam Park in here, and we
If
tailored
what you say is 3 rows back.
we asked him to tailor his project, and he did just what we were asking. A lot of the buildings there have peaked roofs, they collaborative with walls. Our town is a collaborative town, so it's, the shape and configuration of a lot of the appointments up there fit the town well. And, you put in the fire pits and the walkability.
Okay.
It's great. So, commercial, if we can continue to focus on keeping our commercial where it belongs, I think we'll be successful.
Okay. Other questions that maybe what Richard didn't cover, or anything, Chase?
One thing you touched on was the need for affordability. Help me understand your perspective of the relationship between affordability and density. Can we have one without the other, or do they necessarily have to go hand in hand?
Well, affordability. You're talking anywhere from high 200s to 300s, if you're talking to a single-family houses or condos or whatever kind of structure you want to call it. Well, when a piece of land in Littleton sells for $250,000, you can't really build for $50,000 or $150,000. So how can you take a piece of land, any piece of land, and add a house to it and call it affordable because it can't sell for under $500,000? So you have to be as creative with your planning as possible. Now, the town's got a lot of open space. The town's got a lot of reserved land. Half the cost of a house is the land. If you can take that half cost out and have the town build those houses on town land, then you can sell them for $250,000 or $300,000. But it takes some work on both the selectmen and the planning board's part to go down that path.
Any
Just a quick
questions?
one.
Ed?
Richard, you talked about rezoning some of the downtown area with an overlay. Have you done any research with form-based code?
I've looked at it and I'm studying it more. It looks very, very interesting. I think it could work in our downtown area because the way it doesn't look at uses on spot pieces of land. It looks at the objective that you want to have in that area. Basically, what do you want to have? And so rather than being as linear as uses does, it gives you more flexibility. So I've got a lot more reading to do on it, but I think it's got great potential for that particular spot.
Okay, great. Any other questions, Mr. Crowley? And you'll hang around if anything pops up that people come up with later?
Okay?
All right, thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Kristen Guichard or Guichard?
Sorry.
Guichard, all right. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you very much for having me.
Sure, good for you to come forward. And as with the others, just tell us a little bit about yourself, why you're interested, and then we'll go through that awkward exercise of sharing the questions back and forth.
Sure. My name is Kristen Guichard. I have been a professional planner for the past 10 years, working in the Metro West Boston area. I saw this as an opportunity to serve my community on a short-term basis. I am a planner in Acton, and I take master planning and community development very seriously, and I really just hope to provide, again, a short-term, short-term assistance or serve on a short-term basis, so.
Okay, great, thank you. I think it's the planning board's turn to lead off with the question.
If appointed by the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board, do you intend to run for the seat in May, or are you proposing to serve as a caretaker until the town general election?
So I guess I already kind of skipped to that a bit, but yeah, I plan to just serve as a caretaker until the town general election.
Okay, all right.
Follow the same
Yep.
pattern, okay. Recently, the town approved and amended a senior residential development zoning bylaw. Have you read it? Do you understand it? And do you agree with it?
I voted for the senior residential development zoning bylaw. I have obviously read it a few times over. And I think it was a very well-written bylaw. I think it gives the planning board a lot of flexibility in trying to achieve the goals that have been stated in the town's master plan as well as the housing production plan. I think it allows for creativity for the board to really work with the developer and to achieve some of the needs that were identified in the housing production plan too. From what I understand, our over 60 population is going to be one of the largest populations in the coming years, and we really need to think about how to design residential developments in a way that is not just compatible for them inside the house, but also the site layout. And to have services nearby or services as part of that development, potentially that can assist them or people that are visiting them, but also to access, open space that Littleton is so well known for, and to develop in a way that achieves, several goals of the master plan as well in terms of connectivity and accessibility.
Great. Planning board?
Number is it?
Three.
My turn?
Go ahead.
What role do you think the planning board has in realizing and implementing the town's master plan?
I think the planning board should find consistency with the master plan when making their decisions, and to look to the master plan as their guiding document. Obviously, they have the zoning bylaw, but oftentimes with special permits, it references consistency with the master plan, and I think that's really another tool that the board can use to try to implement the master plan every time a permit comes in front of them. I think, taking a role in town visioning and master planning, for example, for the Littleton Common, I think planning board members, should take an active role in that as well, in helping to craft, future zoning or form-based code for that initiative.
Okay, I'll take the next one. Are there any potential conflicts of interest you might have while serving on the board? And if yes, what are they?
No, I do not.
Okay, planning board?
What are your thoughts about current and future residential and commercial development in Littleton?
So in terms of residential development, I know that we just passed a bylaw more recently for inclusionary zoning, so I'm excited about that. I know affordable housing is a big issue in Littleton, as it is in a lot of the communities around us. I think we have, like 30% that are almost housing burdened. So, looking again to the seniors and to the younger population, trying to either move back home where they grew up or to stay where they grew up is also a goal. Looking at diversity in housing options. So not just one type of housing option, but a diversity of housing options that allows for people to live different types of lifestyles as they age in place, or as they're looking to move back home or stay here if they're younger, and also have options to, for example, not have to get in your car every time you want to drive or every time you want to go to a store. But then maybe there are some people that still want to live out in a more rural setting. In terms of commercial development in Littleton, I'm very excited about the Littleton Common master planning. I am aware that we're looking at form-based code and the more recent selection or the development patterns that kind of rose to the top from the community planning effort, I think is exciting to look forward to. And that's, I guess, my major thoughts. I mean, in terms of the point, I know that's kind of like the biggest, newest development, and there is, I know on your agenda tonight, a hotel potentially coming to locate here. And I think that's also exciting, not just for us as residents to be patrons there, but also for economic development. I think that's really great for the town in terms of the tax base and just keeping a strong economic base for the town, budget-wise, so.
Any follow-up questions for Kristen? Again, hang it, if you would hang in there, as we get into deliberations, we may come back to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen.
All right, alphabetically, next up, Jerry Portante. Evening, Jerry.
How are you?
Good. You know the drill, so if you'd like to start off by again telling the town anyway through the meeting, who we are and why you're interested.
Jerry Portante, I've lived in town for about 18 years, 3 kids, well, 2 kids left in the school system. Did 5 years on the planning board. I think Jamie Cruz took my seat. So I heard about the opening and I want it back.
Did 5 years or something for prison.
Just thinking the same.
I noticed the word choice also.
Good call.
Well, just to that point, to me, it's a service job. I'm not an attorney, I'm not a real estate agent, I don't work in the town, I'm a resident, private citizen. So to me, I look after people like me. So that's where I come from.
Okay, great. Then starting off the questions, I've lost track. Who's up first this time around?
I think we're up.
All right, Mr. Knox, you wanna?
Okay. If appointed the Board of Selectmen, if you're appointed by the Board of Selectmen Planning Board to serve, do you intend to run for the seat, or are you gonna be a caretaker?
I'll run for the seat.
Okay, straightforward. Planning board question?
Recently, the town approved and amended a senior residential development zoning bylaw. Have you read it? Do you understand it? And do you agree with it?
So I haven't read it personally. I've heard a lot about it. I watched both plans that came up on TV to see how that was being implemented. From what it sounds like, it's not a senior bylaw. It's a high-density zoning bylaw. So there's not enough senior component to it. I think you just need to take a look at it, maybe tweak it a little bit and see how you're gonna make it work to get more of a senior yield out of it, if that's the goal. If that's not the goal, then maybe you scrap it and do something else.
Okay. Selectman question, Cindy? Or-
Sure. What role do you think the planning board has in realizing and implementing the town's master plan?
Well, I think once a master plan is complete, then it's the planning board's job to facilitate it and implement it as best they see fit. My understanding is, from a planning standpoint, at that point, it's a done deal. You go in front of the town, you make your zoning adjustments, and the town moves forward. So I think that's our role in that regard.
Okay. Planning board question?
Are there any potential conflicts of interest you might have while serving on the board, and if yes, what are they?
I don't think so.
Okay. Chase, selectman question.
What are your thoughts about current and future residential and commercial development in Middleton?
So I have mixed feelings about it. I mean, I came here 18 years ago because we didn't want to live in Acton. I'm from Acton. I don't like what Acton did, how the density is. They've jammed a house in every square foot of that place. I think Littleton should be a little bit more deliberate and thoughtful about how they go about. I mean, we're going to grow. I'm not against growth. I like growth. But I don't want to walk out my front door and not be able to get anywhere in my town. I certainly don't want to be in a situation where, you kind of get priced out. When you talk about protecting seniors, when we price a lot, my mother has to leave Acton because she's priced out. Even if her house is, gone up 3,000%, it doesn't matter, right? The taxes are too high. We should avoid that, get a good mix. I think Concord Carlisle is a great example of that. They have a low tax rate because they have such a good mix of business with residential, even though their valuations are high, but their rates are low. So I think we should look at doing that the best we can. So I think a good commercial component, raising the value of our commercial property, I think is important. But I also think a lot of that's going to happen anyways. Littleton's a high-value town. We've done a great job. A lot of people want to come here. Housing values are way up. So my feelings are I think we just need to be aware of what a lot of these bylaws mean and see how they're effectively used and what the markets will bear, and always be ready to make a change and tweak it out. Honestly, I don't know what the answer is. I think it's a question of just being open to the current environment.
Follow-up questions for Jerry, topics that didn't come up. Anna?
Well, I think this is more of a follow-up for Mr. Portante, so having received the interview questions in advance, I'm just curious why you had not read the senior residential bylaw to be able to speak about
It's the
it.
first time I've seen this question. When were these questions sent out?
I don't know, I would do it.
Last Wednesday. Okay, so Lauren said that she had sent them.
Separate question, if I may.
Sure.
If the planning board renders a decision, should the applicant adhere to those decisions? Should they be held responsible for the decisions the planning board puts on them?
Wait, say that one more time?
Providing that, let's say the planning board says you gotta put one tree every 5 feet, they put one tree every 70 feet. Should we require the applicant to put one tree every 5 feet?
If it's in the rules, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Jerry? Again, we can always get back to you if something comes up during the discussion. And we have one more interviewee. Thank you. Thanks, All right, and Steve, just as Aaron is used to being at the beginning of the list since his last name's B, I'm sure that W, this is not the first time you've been the last in line.
Thank you.
All right, Steve Wheaton.
My name is Steve Wheaton. I grew up in town. I went to Townsend for about 10 years. When I started my family, came back in 1995, so I guess you'd call me a townie. I saw the opening. What I do is I'm in sales for an international shipping and trading company. My office is in my house. As I'm getting older, I'm kind of dialing down the travel I have now, so I've been away from it for a while now, so now I feel as if I have something to put back into the town and offering my services. So I saw the opening and I said, I'll give it a shot, because I remember the days you couldn't get people to run for certain positions in town. And I'm just happy to see there's 5 people here that showed up and is interested in the position. So I was on the planning board from, I think it was like 1997 to 2011, about 12 years. I actually took over Marin's position when she became the administrator, and I filled that position. I held that position for the final 2 years of her term, I believe, and then I ran two more terms for that. And it just got to the point where I was busier, I was traveling more. The meetings were, the town was growing, and there was more meetings and more stuff going on, and I just felt at that point it's probably a good time for me just to not run and let somebody else come and see where they go with it. But I'm just offering my services here and see where that goes. Okay.
No, I'm just trying to remember where I was in my rotation. Hope I didn't throw you off your game there. Okay, is it planning board question this time around?
Might as well.
Whatever, yeah.
If appointed by the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board, do you intend to run for the seat in May, or are you proposing to serve as a caretaker until the town general election?
Honestly, it's about 50-50. I was thinking of running, and I'm still trending that way, but we'll see as we get a little closer. It seems like there's a lot of applicants, or a lot of people saying they're going to run now, so we'll see how that flushes out. But yeah, I'm trending towards running again, absolutely.
Okay. Selectman question, Mr. DeCosta?
Recently, the town approved and amended a senior residential development zoning bylaw. First, have you read it? Do you understand it? Do you agree with it?
Yeah, I did read it. I do understand it to a point. I wasn't involved in all the negotiations up to that point and how we got to that bylaw and everything in it. I do like that the planning board still has a lot of leeway in it, which is always good, because each development is a little bit different, each proposal a little bit different. I think you have to look at them all differently. I agree with it. Again, I look at it as more, these days, as I'm getting older, 55 or older doesn't sound old to me. I think it should be 65 or older, but that's another subject. But I do agree, I think it'd be a good fit for certain parts of the town to have, like, over 65 type of different facilities available for our aging population. Not just housing, but, you know, the extra care and the other facilities that kind of is going towards, I believe. You know, I always had a problem with over 55 developments before, because if it wasn't deed restricted and all that, then, you know, it starts out maybe at over 55, but then later on it just turns into just more or less affordable housing. And it wasn't really intended what it was supposed to be, so.
Planning board questions?
What do you think the role of the planning board has in realizing and implementing the town master plan?
Well, I mean, I was involved in the previous master plan, and I think the planning board was, you know, the driving force to that one, and kind of held all the meetings, and, you know, kind of guided the town through that whole process. And I think it's important for, you know, once it's implemented and town votes for it, that for everything that comes before us, we should be looking at, you know, the master plan as a background, and how this new bylaw, how this new development, how this new commercial building fits into that whole master plan, and just try to hit as many of those points as we possibly can, that's my opinion.
Thank you.
Selectman question, Mr. Knox. 4.
Are there any potential conflicts of interest that you might have while serving on the board? If yes, what are they?
No, I have no conflicts. I'm not in real estate. I don't have any developments I'm building in the background, or just nothing.
Okay, and final question from the prepared questions, planning board.
What are your thoughts about current and future residential and commercial development in Littleton?
My thoughts, you know, starting with commercial first, you know, it always bothered me, there's so many empty buildings, you know, on the Taylor Street, the Foster Street area, that I think we really need to focus on getting those populated or repopulated, what we have to do, and go to those sites, you know, some other areas like in the Sandville area, you know, where commercial development is perfect spots for it. I really think we should be filling those areas first. You know, with the Point project, I think I wasn't involved with that at all, but I followed that pretty closely, and I think that turned out really well, and it's like an excellent spot, an excellent facility for this town. It really doesn't implement traffic, doesn't bother traffic in town.
Where do you live again? I gotta go by that every day.
You gonna go another way?
Oh, all right.
Go to Side Street. So residential, I guess I'm an old townie. I mean, I like the town the way it was. I think it was mentioned before, we used to be the size of Acton and Westford back in the day. And I've seen Acton just grow and grow, and just to the point where somebody else mentioned that too, there's a small condo development on every 2 feet, every corner. The same with Westford, just grew out of control. And I think, you know, the town of Littleton, you know, through the Board of Selectmen and Planning Board for years and years have really, you know, kept the town really what it is. And I'm not huge on forcing affordable development to an extent. There are a lot of older developments in town, Snow Village, Witchwood Drive areas, where there are a lot of small ranch-style houses that are basically, I would say, affordable. What affordable is these days in this area. Littleton is a perfect town now. You know, it's a target. It's right off of 495 and Route 2. You know, it's a dream, a salesman's dream to live here. You know, you have access to everywhere really quick. So we're going to have a lot of people moving in just for those reasons. And I think the main concentration should be on the senior development, the senior housing that they can move into. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. That's it for the formal questions. Any follow-ups for Steve? Topics that didn't get...
I have a question.
Mark?
You were on for 12 years. You served back in the 80s, 90s.
Not 80s.
Well, I mean the 90s and 2000s.
That was you.
That was me. I forgot. What do you think your the best development that you did? What are you the most proudest of the 12 years that you were there?
Honestly, I think I'm most proud of how the town, the planning board, stood up against the
the Walker development that was going to go on next to Donlands and on the other side of the street. You know, we were threatened with lawsuits, we had lawsuits, I mean, we put up with a lot with that, and I think we really stood up to stop that huge grocery store from going across the street from Donlands, and then the overdevelopment next to Donlands. And I think, you know, what went in eventually, the Toyota dealership, the other stuff, you know, it's not ideal, but I think, you know, as far as how it affects the town, it's more or less a lower impact, so I think stopping the Walker development was probably one of the things I'm most proud of, to be honest with you.
Thank you. Okay, this is where we no longer have a game plan, but it's an important discussion. Well, thank you, Steve, and stick around. I would like to try to move this along, but at the same time, it's an important decision, appointment. So if you've got something to say, please add it to the conversation, but do it as concisely as you can. And I think it's appropriate that we start with planning board members, what your reaction is, what, you know, Mr. Chairman, I'll defer to you with your membership.
Happy that we had 5 people come and want to be on the planning board. I think that bodes well for what hopefully will happen in May. I think they're all qualified in their own rights. They all bring different things to the table. And I'd like to pick somebody that I think will help us, not just in the short run, but hopefully moving forward. And I don't know how the rest of the board feels.
No, I'd like to thank all the applicants for obviously stepping forward and volunteering their time. I'd be interested to hear what everybody has to say and weigh in on it.
Oh, you're looking for us to name somebody?
Somebody's got to get off the schneid there, Peter. You're usually good for that.
Good for something. I actually, I was impressed with all of them. I mean, they were all very, you know, obviously intelligent people and take the town at heart and such, but the one that I was really impressed quite a bit with was, is it Kristen? Is it Kristen?
Mm-hmm.
Well, one is she's gonna, you know, fill out the seat, you know, up till May, so it doesn't give one of the other applicants an, you know, advantage on the rerun come May. She's a town planner already of Acton. It's the first time I've ever met her. She's articulate, she's intelligent, and not that the other ones are not, but she impressed me the most out of, and again, one person that can then help us in this little transition that we have going. And then come May, the other 4 can go at it. That's my opinion. But again, I was very impressed with all of them.
Okay.
So, there you go.
All right, any other planning board comments before I invite our board into the discussion? Anna?
Sure. Well, I actually happen to have similar thoughts as my colleague Peter Scott. I do believe that Kristen would be able to slide right in, so to speak, and get to work on all of the work that the planning board has before it, because she has that expertise. And I think that for various reasons, the applicants who have come before us and perhaps were not able to articulate in terms of where we are, having done their homework, so to speak, is very important. I mean, being prepared for meetings, and so I understand that somebody may not have received an email or whatever the case is, but certainly being prepared for the meeting is going to be important, so thank you.
You guys have any?
I guess I'm a little different than Peter and Anna. I like the fact that there's a couple of people that are before us right now that have actually served on the board, and we can get up to speed. They've been on for a number of years, and we've got some important stuff before us right now before May comes along. So I think it would be more advantageous to the board if we pick somebody that has already been on the board who can assist us in the developments that are pending, that have been on treading water while we wait for a new member of the board. So I think I'm leaning more towards somebody along that line as opposed to bringing somebody in brand spanking new for the interim up until May. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I don't know where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Well, I think I'd be interested to hear what the Board of Selectmen has to say, similar to when you were doing the interviews for town manager, or town administrator. You waited and made sure you had a consensus when you went forward, so we're looking to do that.
That's tough to do with 5, never mind 9. Joe, why don't you jump in here?
Well, like the planning board member said, there's 5 qualified people. For 3 of the people, at least 3 of the people I've worked with in the past, I really love what Steve Wheaton said when he referred to the area along Air Road as Sandville. We don't hear that too often anymore, but like that. Richard Crowley made a statement that I think we all can agree with. We could lose a whole generation of people if we're not careful, and the seniors. So I was impressed with that answer, very impressed with Kristen. I'm leading to Richard Kristen.
Okay, Chuck, your thoughts initially?
So I actually have a question back to
Sure.
the planning board, just with both Mark and Anna made some statements about what's before them. And so there's 3 scheduled meetings between now and the election, if I'm doing my math correctly. Right? Right?
March, April, and May, 4 actually.
So there's one in May as well, I guess.
One
First
before
one's-
town
So there's 4 meetings. So what,
For town election.
right before the town election, yeah.
before town
So I'm just trying to gauge, coming in tonight, I kind of had predetermined that there were people that had some experience, so I thought it'd be kind of seamless, so I wanted to hear them out. I wanted to hear all 5 people out. I do appreciate everybody coming forward. But after hearing what the board has said relative to having somebody be kind of the caretaker of the position for the next few months, not sure if in those 4 meetings that you have coming up, you guys know what that is, what the agenda is before you, what you can anticipate coming forward, and Myron can help you with that. I think that should weigh pretty heavily on this decision. Is there something that needs to be done within the next 4 months? If that is the case, is it better to have somebody who's got some experience? We've got 3 candidates that have some planning board experience. Is it better to have somebody who's got planning experience, which Kristen, I think, is the only one that has that experience. So what is the work, I guess, that the planning board needs to get done? And I don't mean necessarily specifics, but I think that will help me, and probably my colleagues, to better understand and make a better decision that will help you.
The most important thing we have before us right now are the 2 senior residential developments that are been on hold because we didn't have enough for a quorum for one. And
With King Street and Cricket.
King Street and Cricket, correct. So we need help with that now, not in May.
So one of those things, to piggyback on that, as the SRD is written and why there isn't an age restriction on there is very important, because when you do affordable housing, if you age restrict it, we can no longer count it in our 10%. So understanding it and reading it and why we need to not age restrict the senior residential development is because of what we lose once we age restrict it. Again, there's all kinds of ways to get affordable housing. We all know that. We're all trying to do our best to get there, but I think age restricting anything, again, we lose. So I just want to, when we're talking about a senior residential development, it's age restricted by design. When it's, what we've got in there is what's required and what works. Implementing it has been the hardest part. Yes.
Chuck, to respond to your question.
Sure.
I think that Ms. Gearshard, also prepares the planning board in Acton for some of their meetings. So again, she would be able to dive right into the work that needs to be done. So I really don't have any doubt in my mind about that. In terms of others getting up to speed, because they haven't been doing the work, they haven't been attending planning board meetings. I would see that they would actually have even more work to do in order to be prepared for our meetings, including one that's next week.
Can I ask that question?
Sure.
So I'd like to ask, the chairman put it out there that we may throw another question back at you and to hang around. The question I would throw out there to, I guess everybody but Kristen, if we were to make a decision and select Kristen to be the caretaker of the position until the election, I guess by a show of hands, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
You can ask whatever you want.
Okay, by a show of hands, who would in fact run in May for planning board seat.
Good.
Okay, so
I think that's
I'll
great.
do it, that's great, that is good.
So I'd like to make haven't
Well, please, I want to get around, yeah, I haven't lost control of the meeting yet, I'm teetering, but give me a minute. Come back sometime next year too, Pete.
We'll see what I can do. May's not far away.
I'm gonna regret saying this, but Peter led this off exactly the way that I would have wanted to do. I think Ms. Guichard is the only choice for this position. We should defer to the wisdom of the voters. Each potential candidate in the planning board position, articulated a different vision in 10 minutes. The voters are due a more thorough fleshing out of each of those positions. Ms. Guichard was the only one who indicated that she was willing to take on the role as a caretaker, and it's incumbent upon the other candidates or potential candidates to pull papers and make a more comprehensive argument to the voters. And so in that regard, I only see one choice here, and that's Ms. Guichard.
Okay. Cindy, anything to contribute?
Agree with Chase 100%.
Okay.
So,
All right.
Right.
I'm going to take the chair's prerogative not to offer an opinion. I like all the candidates, 3 that I've had the opportunity to work with, 2 that I'm delighted to see tonight, and hope that through election appointment and the various committees that we appoint in June, then everybody will have a place to chip in. But I guess my year's work as well as everyone else's, I think we have a growing consensus. I also think it's important that the planning board, since you're the people that'll be working with the appointee, that you lead off and, that any motion start there. Doesn't have to be, but I would just suggest that 9 folks that have an eligible opportunity to make a motion or a second. But planning board members?
I'd like to nominate, if you would please say your last name. Kristen.
Guichard?
How do you say it?
Guichard?
I'm gonna learn it. I'm terrible with names. Nominate her to fill the role of,
There's actually a motion.
I like this. Move that the Board of Selectmen, the remaining members of the planning board vote pursuant to MGL C41, Section 11, to appoint Keyshawn, or Kristen, say it again? Well, yes. To fill a vacancy in the planning
We
board
have 2
through the
vacancies tonight.
2019 annual town election. Roll call.
No, I gotta,
I'll second that.
okay. So we do have a motion made
I gotta
by
write names down.
planning board member Scott and seconded by Selectman Gerbig. If you're in favor, obviously vote yes. If you're not, you can vote no. And if it doesn't carry, there'll be an opportunity for another motion, just to explain the process. And we will have to do it by roll call vote. Before we get to that point, any further discussion? If not, then I'm going to start with the planning board and, just as they're seated, planning board member Houston.
Aye.
Mr. Mullen. I got it, what's that? Montanari.
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Scott. Aye. Selectman Knox. Selectman DeCoste. Selectman Gerbig. Selectman Napoli.
Aye.
And the chair will make it unanimous, aye. Okay, terrific. Doesn't always come out that nicely, and good night for the town. There's a lot of people who are interested in the right things, being engaged in our planning for the future. Peter, you had something to say?
Just in no way, shape, or form does it denounce any of the other
No.
4 candidates who are fantastic in all their own ways. I just want to make that sure.
Great, thank you. Kristen, you're gonna have to get yourself sworn in with the town clerk, and Myron will take care of all the details, I'm sure. She's all over these things. Thank you all. I think actually the next couple of topics are just as interesting to the, terrific job. To the planning board members, so once you stick around, we got a couple of, we're behind schedule, but with no apologies. We've got some good presentations ahead of us to match the good work we just had done. So Myron, are you and Judy Barrett taking the lead on this? Or is Judy's presenting? Come on up, I saw you back there. Anthony, any presentation prep for this?
No, Judy's got everything under control.
Okay, so this again is a update on the Littleton Station area plan. So again, that's the, for those that don't know it by that name, the train MBTA station on Foster Street and the area around it. We have a subcommittee. I know, Cindy, you're representing the Selectmen on that committee. And with that, we'd look forward to hearing what you have to present to us.
Thank you.
Good
I'll
to see
try
you again.
Nice to see you, too. And it was nice to see you with MMA.
Yes.
So, I'll try to keep this brief, because I know you've got other things on the agenda tonight, but really, we wanted to just give you an update on this project and make sure everybody's aware that it's going on. So, I'll just introduce you to kind of the background here. As I think all of you know, the master plan, which was completed in 2017, puts a lot of emphasis on where the town has some opportunities to sort of pursue the goals of the plan in residential and commercial and industrial development and institutional uses and so forth. And so those areas really were kind of the first priority being the common, but also the area around Littleton Station, and then just generally industrial and commercial areas where some redevelopment or infill potential exists, and sort of how to capitalize on those existing developed areas. And one of the comments from the master plan that I think is just good to keep in mind is that, and this is in the land use element and also pretty much duplicated in most of the others, that the town needs to look at managing growth by allowing greater density in places where it makes sense to intensify land use, in other words, in sort of recognized activity areas near the train station, around the common, and in older industrial or commercial areas where redevelopment opportunities exist. And of course, the whole logic in that is that when you try to concentrate development in areas where you've already got it, it increases the potential for a community to protect that which you would want to protect, which is those beautiful green spaces that exist in your town. So the Master Plan Implementation Committee, I'm not stealing your thunder, Mike, but just a little bit of background here. They've been working on the revitalization of the Common, and I think recently just completed a project on that with a report entitled the Littleton Common Revitalization Roadmap. And they're looking at kind of other implementation initiatives. But while they've been working on the Common project, meanwhile, the town became eligible to apply for a special grant program that was unveiled last spring for communities that had already done a lot to encourage housing production, and your town was one of the designated housing choice communities. So your town went after this funding because it's out there and you're eligible for it, and sure enough, Mass Housing, which is the funding agency, awarded you a $65,000 grant in June. And so Mass Housing, because they ran this program by having some designated consultants on a consultants list, knew I had worked here, knew RKG had been here, and so I was asked to sort of come out and help you with this Littleton Station plan. And what Mass Housing did in awarding the grant was say, well, if you decide to go forward with some significant zoning changes, we'll increase that award. But right now, let's get the planning done. And that seemed to make a lot of sense. So between Mass Housing's funding and a match that the town had provided, we're going forward. It seemed to make sense to kind of step back a little bit and not get everybody sort of too focused on this when the Master Plan Implementation Committee was trying so hard with all of you to work on the Littleton Common project. So we kind of stepped back and focused on data analysis and, the things I love. And we pulled together a lot of market and updated the demographics in the master plan, purchased some proprietary data that we really needed to get a better handle on what was going on with the market here. We did several site visits, both there and looking at some other suburban commuter rail stations and kind of what the opportunities are there and what other communities are thinking about in terms of transit-oriented or adjacent development. Did some interviews and site visits here, and just began to collect some case studies that we thought might be usable. And so we're looking not only in Massachusetts, but also in the DC area, in Florida, in New York, places that are really kind of focusing on how do you capitalize on the presence of a train station to deal with growth management issues, and held some interviews at Town Hall. And that was sort of the summer and fall piece. And as soon as you got through town meeting at the end of October, then Maren and I started talking in earnest about now how do we actually move this forward and give it a public face, which is why I'm here tonight. In August, we had also met with the planning board kind of informally. You guys probably remember this. Maren and I had tried to sort of scope out what a study area might look like. The planning board gave that some thought and said, well, let's pull some parcels out, but the ones that are up there in blue on that map really sort of comprise the study area, and the ones that are yellow, we've kept them kind of in reserve to say, well, they're part of the area and maybe an area of influence, but we're really focusing on those blue parcels. So that's, when we call the Littleton Station Area Plan, that's kind of the area that we're talking about. Moving into fall, winter now, which is where we are, RKG has finished a draft of a market overview for me. I'm going through some comments on that with RKG, but they're looking at what's the market potential for this area and what's happening around you in terms of commercial, industrial, and residential development, and how does that perhaps shape or constrain your opportunities. Peter Flinker, who you may remember from the master plan process, will be coming back on April 5th and 6th to do a Littleton Station visioning process, starting off with a kind of a field visit, site walk, as we did for the Common, and then having kind of an intensive planning day. We'll do a community survey coming out of that. And as you know, we've established a working group, which, which Cindy is on, and Anthony and some other folks, because I was feeling like I need to have somebody to talk to about this project. And I know the planning board's had a lot going on and so forth. So we have a working group. We're meeting once a month. I'm targeting March 1 for kind of a significant interim report on this project. I'd like to get that out before we have that visioning event, so people have information with which to work when they come to the vision event. Our target for completion is June 30th. I'm told by Mass Housing there's a little bit of wiggle room on that deadline, but I think we're going to make that timeline without any trouble. Following the vision event, we'll put together kind of a set of, well, here are sort of real opportunities. Here's what the town wants, and here's what the market says it can do, and how can we bring these things together? So, again, this is just kind of looking at properties that are out in that study area and thinking about, how do you take advantage of this place that already exists, that probably is an opportunity area, and the question is for what? So key issues for the project are, first of all, what does the town actually want? And it's true that we did a master plan, but one of the things that comes out of a community-wide master plan is a recognition that certain areas need more attention. That's why you did the Littleton Common study. What is the town willing to consider? Sometimes what you want isn't necessarily attainable, so what are you willing to consider? What can the market support near or longer term? How can new development in that area help the town address a variety of goals in the master plan: economic development, residential, land use, open space? And then how can the town balance the neighborhood's needs and desires with those community-wide planning goals? So those are sort of the key issues that are organizing the project, and we're going to answer them by June 30th, one way or the other. But that's the project, and I'm happy to, respond to any questions you have, or get you excited about the project.
And I appreciate your succinct delivery too, Judy, as important as it is. Questions, comments? Maybe Cindy, since you're a rep on the committee, what's your view of how this is moving along?
Well, the initial meeting was it was great. Judy had some great information I had never seen before, just as far as development that's taking place,
The regional
close-
market, regional
Yes,
map, yeah.
exactly, closer to Boston. You could really see literally how it's just urban sprawl, how it's just coming this way. But we had a lot of discussions about the needs in the community, the concerns of development in that area, especially with the Foster Street residents. We talked about how we can utilize the train station and that traffic and people that might want to work and commute in Boston, and how that can be beneficial to revitalize in that area. But, I mean, the bottom line is it's been dormant, that end of town, for so long. And we talked about how it makes sense to develop in areas where it makes sense in Littleton. Littleton's only so big.
Right.
So that's really an underutilized part of town, so I'm glad that we're moving forward and looking into prospects there and what we can do with it. And Chuck, I think that you're on this working group as well on behalf of the EDC, correct?
We missed you.
Right, so,
I was absent.
yeah.
Yeah, but you'll be at the next meeting, right?
Absolutely,
Super,
Judy, I
great.
promise.
Thank you.
Thank you for pointing that out. I'll invite questions not only from other board members, but planning board members as
So
well.
I was at the last meeting with Cindy as well, the rep
Right.
for the planning board, and just to echo what Cindy said, but just because I know with certain individuals watching on TV, I just want to say Al White West. Kidding, of course, but. He knows what I'm talking about. No, in all seriousness, I think that when we saw the information of what's coming our way, I think it's great that we're doing this study so we can get a handle on it, so we can be prepared as much as possible to do something. I also think it piggybacks on everything else we're looking at as far as common revitalization, smart sewer, form-based code. I think all these things, long-term, fit the master plan and fit what the town needs and wants.
Great.
Hi, Judy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm getting better, thank you. So I know that you had quite a few, many focus groups with folks. And any chance that you had an opportunity to meet with folks that live in the area and your residents to talk
Not
with
yet.
them?
Not yet. Part of this was because of the Littleton Common project and all the sort of focus on that. Marla and I had a conversation early on, and it just seemed to make sense to get the sort of, I'll call it the grunt work, just the data mining that needed to be done, and start to become more public about this, kind of at this point, which is part of why we're here tonight. So I do want to talk to people in the neighborhood, we just aren't there yet.
So will that first opportunity be in April or?
Well, I would actually like to meet with some people out there before then. I just don't think it's fair to a neighborhood to kind of spring something on them when it's a whole big public process, but I don't have a date in mind. It's probably something I need to deal with sooner than later.
Okay, thank
And
you.
I'd be happy to take any direction from you folks that you think in terms of scheduling out or where or how to do it. We're going to have another meeting, I think, in a few weeks anyways, a working
Correct.
group, so we'll talk about that.
You're in good hands.
Great, thank you.
Members, Chase?
The only thing to note here is to make sure that everybody's talking with respect to the roadway realignments and all of that work to make sure that you've got the information you need there, and you're nodding your head, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna stay out of it.
No, but you're right to bring that up. It's absolutely, it's very, very, very important.
I'll just offer up, because I do see some of the neighbors here. I'll just offer up that Cindy and I are part of this group.
Yep.
So if you guys have any questions, by all means, prior to Judy and her people going out and talking to you all, feel free to call me.
Yeah, I'm happy to
Email.
do a neighborhood meeting well before April 5th. I mean, just help me coordinate it and I'll do it.
Well, for that matter, I open it to the public. If you do have questions.
Sure.
Everybody's here, so
Right.
if you're a neighbor or just a resident who has a interested question on the project, by all means, raise your hand, ask it now, or maybe grab Judy at the back of the room after she's done
But be nice to
presenting.
me.
Okay, sir.
I have a comment.
Just for the
and a question.
record, yeah.
John Court from Ernie Stride in Littleton. I ride the train every day, and pulling out of the train station can be pretty treacherous at times. And so I would hope, and I hope that you'd consider what the commuters are facing as far as traffic going out of the station. There's, especially the one that's furthest north. I was trying to look at that on the diagram. It almost looks like you're not gonna have that anymore. But the way that you try to take a left out of that, so there's two entries and exits, right? One that's further north for the upper lot. You can take a turn there, and there's a lot of potential.
People coming
for-
down that
for
hill,
an
it's kind of a
accident.
blind turn.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a blind turn, it's very, very dangerous, so, lines of sight, I think, from just pulling out of there every day is very important to me. Yeah, that spot right there, and people are parking on the grass, and that even makes it worse, because,
That's right.
and I think some of the Littleton police have told people with traffic tickets that that's not supposed to happen.
Well, and that's why I actually raised it, because there's a lot of different things going on here, some of which we, as the municipality, can control. The roadway, the planning, to some extent parking, although a lot of that is on the MBTA as well to work with us. So we're really trying to look at this as comprehensively as possible, and this is a perfect time to do it because we're actually putting a design together right now. In fact, that's what these are, is unrelated to the work that Judy's doing, a design for road improvements going on out there. So all of these pieces need to fit together simultaneously.
It's good to know.
Great. Again, this is just the beginning of the process, not the end by any means, but if you have any other questions, comments while we're at the point of entertaining this update?
I just have one.
Sure, Joe.
It's, I'm glad it's being done, Judy, because it's been on our goals since I've been on. It's been called different things. I know Keith had named it Crossroads, but it's something that has to be studied. That whole area has been, I don't want to say ignored, but it's been put on the back burner and it shouldn't be. Whether it's traffic or whether it's trying to get people to fill those buildings or anything new that might go in there, it has to be taken a look at.
So when Joe started this, it was actually the stagecoach. Sorry, it was there.
All right. Well, I'm sure we will see you again before too long, and thank you. Great to see you in town
Thank you.
again.
Yep, thanks a lot. I'll be checking in.
All right. Our next update, I know I saw back there somewhere, Sam Park and Company. Hello, Sam. You got more good news for us tonight, do you?
Well, I guess my job today is a little easier than usual. Well, actually, it's always easy. But it was really to introduce you to some people that you may have worked with on our project in the past, and maybe put a little substance behind a rumor you may have heard. I actually didn't know it was leaking out yet until I got confronted by both the police and fire chief, and they said, "Can't wait for a new hotel to show up at the Point." Oh, okay, I guess that the word's out. So I thought I'd give a quick update, and then before introducing my friends from Opeechee, who represent Opeechee and the LaFrance family that currently own the Marriott Hotel at the Point. And actually, if I had known there was so much hotel interest when I started this, I probably wouldn't have given them an exclusive to do all the hotels with us at the Point. But I actually probably still would have chosen. They are a great family, they're a great company, both Opeechee and the LaFrance family. And I don't say that about a lot of hotel people that we've dealt with, candidly, but we have done deals now. This last deal was done essentially on a handshake, and it's come out exactly the way we want. And when you're building a project that has multi-tenants, like, you kind of have to pick those you want to kind of deal with. You know, we chose a town that we really like, we chose, the grocer that we like, we chose the Opeechee family, and it's always worked out, O'Neill's, and what have you. So in that sense, we're pretty selective on who we bring into the Point. So we're really happy that the LaFrance family of Opeechee have decided. So with me tonight, I have Tim Burkhart and Keith Kelly.
Welcome.
And their consultant, Phil, who I'm sure you've seen before. But just as a quick nutshell, in case people aren't familiar with it, this is just sort of a site, I'll start with them and come back to you.
Sure.
What you see in sort of the aerial photograph is basically what's been built in gray, and what is left in white is our next subsequent set of phases. So from your perspective.
It's also on the TV screen too, so everyone can see that.
Okay, so this one's just slightly a little different, but I'll just go like this and play Von and White here for a second.
By a vowel.
That's why I grew my hair long. So I haven't had a chance to get it cut, but
Can we get an M?
there you go. So the current Marriott's over here, and I'll leave all the description of it, but just to give you where we are with the Point and why we think it's a great addition. We've basically, been going, soldiering up the hill lot by lot, and as we're doing this, we're just about ready to open the Metro Rock Climbing Gym. It'll include a small amount of retail in front of it, and part of that is because, and I'll give a lot of credit to like the planning board and the selectmen, because the thoughtful process you did talking about, I was listening to your interviewing questions, the process this town went through in terms of its master plan, the criteria that the planning board established, and actually the flexibility that it gave us to sort of weave and bob to address, we've been at this now for what, 12 years, or 10 years almost. Markets change, but the fact that the criteria in the master plan that's been approved gives us the flexibility to bring tenants in as they surface to the market, the ability to move pieces around without the fear of losing or, having to get everything, reapproved. A big win. It's, if I were to tell you anything on your master planning effort, was to get the criteria so that there's some flexibility. Not that we have carte blanche, by no means. I mean, we've spent years battling out details, and I don't say battling, but working on the details. It gives you the flexibility to know that there's an end, something that you'll get to that won't get derailed. So it makes that investment of time worthwhile. So if you look at it, you clearly have the big anchor buildings, the part that has the fire pits coming through here, Tavern on the Square. We brought in Emerson Hospital up on the upper level. O'Neill Cinema, Metro Rock, and for example, one of the criteria that really worked for us, we have a 0-lot setback. And what that means is we can hide all the ugliness of sides of buildings by just compressing the buildings together. So all you see from a pedestrian experience is the storefronts, the street trees, whereas we have some big buildings, but you don't actually ever feel them. For example, Metro Rock, it's a 40-foot tall warehouse building. But because we were able to tuck other retailers in front of it, the only thing you actually see is sort of this grand entrance to their gym. And they're opening, by the way, next month. So I guess their contractors got tied up by the federal shutdown because they couldn't get into the country. So it was a little bit of a...
Should have tried the southern border, and it's
Right.
open, I hear.
I won't go there, I'm sorry. No matter what I say, I'll get in trouble. But basically, what we're talking about really is just parcel M. And the reason I think it's such a great addition is, as we move and weave and bob, as I said, to get different uses in, we're all constantly looking for uses that are compatible with what's there, and we'll add to it. So the 3 or 4 uses that are still, in our mind, good uses are some additional rooms, only because really, their current hotel is doing phenomenally well. I hear it from people in Groton and people that haven't had options until now. There's still some office that we're looking, not the big IBM type office, but the smaller specialty office, the sort of entrepreneurial space. And we're actually contemplating, one of the spaces next to Emerson as possibly a place to do some of that shared office space. And then basically, we still would like to infill a little bit more of some retail to bring some liveliness up. But we have a lot of, it's actually, the density of this project currently is less than was actually approved. Some of these buildings were approved as multi-story buildings. So our ability to kind of reallocate the square footage doesn't change the impacts. We actually designed it for worst case with office buildings and more than what has been built. So it's kind of good, in my mind, it's an easy fit. We will have a process with the planning board to hopefully reallocate some of the square footage. We'll clearly, as they did with the first hotel, have a process of making sure that the plans are consistent with our overall master plan for the point. What's great about working with the Peachy is they ask for our input before we hear it from the town, so that's always helpful. And then we'll have some process of just making sure we're doing, and just for reality check, we're doing our own feasibility study with Peachy in terms of, is there some economic constraints on us in terms of building, expanding the treatment plant, things like that. So we're kind of assessing at the same time now. So that's why I said it's easier to work with a group you know than a group you don't know, because it gives us this next couple weeks and months to kind of perfect the plan for the site. So with that, let me turn it over to Keith. He's with Peachy. I think you've probably dealt with him on the last one. And I'm here to answer any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sam.
Is this,
Thank you.
is that what you have up
That
there?
is that one. Good evening, members of Selectmen and the Planning Board. My name is Keith Kelly. I'm an architect. I did work on the other project out at the Point, the Courtyard by Marriott. Here with La France, and we're discussing this next hospitality hotel project, which is proposed right now as a Home 2 by Hilton. So it's a Hilton brand, which is obviously, like McDonald's and Burger King like to be on opposite street corners. Hilton and Marriott like to do the same thing. And certainly with the same ownership, there's an ability to have both sides of the fence for the La France family. It's an extended stay product, so the intent here is to have non-transient or less transient stays. The average stay is somewhere between 7 and 11 nights. There's small kitchenettes in each of the rooms, a very efficient box for the guest room for the extended stay traveler. And really the intent here is to build out, as we discussed, this portion right by the O'Neill Cinema and provide another offering that La France can take advantage of out here at the Point, which has been super successful for them, and we think would be super successful again, and for them and for the town. So we're very early in the process, as you can see. It's really just a concept, and wanted to get in front of the boards as soon as possible and be able to share our ideas and our thoughts on that. It is a branded hotel. From an architecture standpoint, it's the concepts are cookie cuttered across the country to a certain extent. We have some freedoms and liberties, but not many. We can certainly go through that in the process, but if you Googled Home 2 suites, you'll see the beautiful representations of them across the country, and they do what they do. They're a brand. They fit in as they do. We did make some modifications, if you remember, that we did on the courtyard that we could certainly entertain for the Home 2, but essentially, we have our plans, we have what Hilton likes us to do, and that's what we'll present for the next phase, but we wanted to get in front of you sooner than later.
Okay, so again, just to, in terms of its location, it looks like on the other map, for
Where
people
that
who
is?
can- to visualize it, it's the, it's the southern lane on 495 would be the closest building to that lane, right? And it's kind of southwest of the O'Neill Cinemas, right?
It's pretty much where the, if you're down there and you see the sign that says The Point,
Okay.
that
yep.
pad. So if you're at the O'Neill Cinema, it's where we right now have more dirt and
Right.
building products.
All right. In terms of just a baseline comparison, hotel to hotel, how is this in terms of intended size, height, et cetera?
It's approximately the same size. We're about 55,000 square feet. I forget what the other one, the courtyard, about the
yeah.
same, isn't it? And it's 94 rooms versus 115. So,
Okay, comparable? Yeah.
comparable.
Okay. What numbers?
I have a question relative to meeting space. Is there any?
Right now, there isn't.
Okay. Because there literally is no place in Littleton to have any type of off-site meeting.
Were you listening to our sidebar out the back of it?
I was not.
So no,
Well, this
there
would be
isn't.
good because we have that nice room that we used for the first skating session, right? That we had thought about actually getting some conference space. But if there's a demand that, I wasn't aware there was such a huge.
Oh, sure, yeah, family functions, you name it, that sort of thing, yeah. Award
court-
ceremonies, all those.
Fundraisers.
But it's about 50, 50,
Yeah.
60?
Yeah, we wish we built larger. We have actually contemplated the pool and different uses to try to expand with meeting space. So we may look at that a little harder with.
I would recommend taking a good look at that, yeah.
I know from my viewpoint, my business has rented that, the one that's there now. And we've had people say it's not big enough for what they were doing, so. Yeah.
Again, planning board members, you'll have your whack at them, but feel free to jump in right now.
We'll wait till we see it.
Hey, since Sam brought up the rink and the space for the rink,
Sure.
is the rink something that's coming back? We get that question a lot.
It's been I started it 1 year too early, but we had the room. And I guess the problem with the rink is we don't, we take safety very seriously.
Sure.
So when you're building that close to where the rink would have to be, we didn't feel it was safe last year or this year to do it. We do need to find, we're hoping to find a spot. At some point, we will run out of space to do the rink, but I think we're looking this fall to do it, this coming year to do it again, basically on Building K. So really, which would be where those, basically right at the top of the hill, opposite the Emerson pad. So you can see that we've already leveled it out. That's in anticipation of bringing the rink back.
Great.
I would love at some point to talk more about long-term, if there's other places we can tuck the rink and maybe make it a more permanent facility.
Behind the police station.
I mean, you know, the great thing about this hotel coming, a second one here is, first of all, it adds a little bit more depth to the market, which I think is very helpful for us. But we like it, you know, because that particular use of extended stay gives us a bigger appeal and draw to the employment base that is currently here. Some places have, you know, overnight peaks. Here, a lot of the stuff is like training, people are coming in for the tech companies.
Week long?
And I hear it all the time. We don't do hotels, so we kind of have to rely on good companies to do them. So I think it'll fit really well. I think the location fits very well with, you know, what we have built out. And it's attached, but somewhat, you know, like the Marriott removed. So it's very good to be very close to everything. And it's just a lot of synergy. It means our restaurants will have people at night, the cinema, the shops. And in fact, it's a funny story, not to take over.
Sure, no, right ahead.
Paper
Everyone
store
else does.
Does phenomenally well, and I asked why, just out of curiosity, and said because we have so many hotel guests that want to buy Red Sox and Bruins sweatshirts.
Okay.
And they said, we would never expected this, but there's a huge demand from the hotel that drives a lot of the traffic, whether it's pizzas or the food. So I think it'll be good for the entire area, including the commons.
Board members? Chase?
questions? I have a couple questions.
I was going to ask about the meeting space, so I'm all set.
Okay.
I had a question about the Home 2 branding versus other Hilton brands. What we don't want as a community is sort of an albatross hanging around our neck. So did Hilton say, Home 2 is what you're going to build? Or did you go to Hilton and say, based on our market analysis, this is what we want?
Yeah, so essentially it was two things. Market analysis for an extended stay product. We already have the Marriott, we wanted to fill the Hilton because most business travelers either probably keep both cards. They keep a Marriott Rewards card and a Hilton Honors card in them, so we wanted to fulfill that need. But also the extended stay market that Sam mentioned is certainly, vibrant in the area. We could have gone to a Homewood Suites by Hilton, but we were kind of limited with the size of the lot, so we opted to go with the Home 2 Suites brand.
Okay, so in other words, if I'm understanding you correctly, your market analysis said an extended stay product was viable and likely to succeed here.
Correct, and in the geographic area, there's one other competitor that features extended stay in Westford, the Residence Inn.
Great. Any other board questions?
Nope.
Mr. Scott?
No, Peter?
Your question is to size, and do you want it right next to 495 for the visualness of it,
Certainly helpful.
as opposed to Mr. Park on the far side? We got a big building down there that would make a larger area.
That's going to be a third hotel.
As far as, speaking of meeting places and a larger area for the more rooms, that idea, have they thought of that?
I would tell you that for us, I think having the taller massing against the highway works better for us. If they wanted to move it, we wouldn't object to it. I think it seems from a planner's perspective a little more appropriate to have the high buildings up against the highway. So, having the Marriott visible helps, I think, with our curb appeal. Having this one on the highway is very good. What people don't realize is you don't really want to have this missing tooth effect with new development. So the ability to kind of balance out the massing really does help a lot. And in this case, they almost act like, they're quality buildings. So by having them on the highway, I think you get, people drive by, they see the hotel. The people going to IBM, Cisco, Red Hat, whatever, are seeing that this is where the hotels are located. You won't see the Residence Inn or the up there or the Hampton in Westford, and they'll suffer for it, unfortunately. So I think this is probably a good marketing approach. Made sense to me.
Chase?
When this project was originally conceived, or prior to the hotel potentially being in Lot M, refresh my memory, what were you looking at putting there originally? What is this replacing? Was there supposed to be something there, or is this?
Actually, this was the original hotel site.
Okay.
They moved it down here because it was a little bit more speculative whether we get all the way up the hill, I think. But it was originally, we had two hotel sites identified in our master plan, both here or basically adjacent to where the Metro Rock was. And at that time, I think we were looking at up to 160 rooms, so the increase in rooms is relatively small overall, because they built basically 115, and now we'll build a slightly smaller one. So it seems fitting for us. But actually, the one that was out of place was the one at the bottom, which was originally retail.
A lot of iterations and versions here to keep track of sometimes.
I probably have a plan for the hotel on every site and for a different building on every site. But that's, when I said that the thoughtfulness that went into the master plan and the zoning criteria, really you should give yourselves and the planning board kudos. I don't just say because you're here, but it's, as a developer, we go into a lot of towns where the guidelines are so strict because they're anticipating one very specific use. And unless you get that one very specific use, no one wants to take the gamble that they will get through the process. Whereas in this case, you set some design criteria, the types of uses you wanted, the pedestrian streets, the pedestrian experience was important. And as long as you stick to those guidelines, then I think you end up with a much better product. And so a lot of things that we've done here probably haven't been done in many other suburbs, like the zero lot line setbacks. but they make a huge difference, because if you can envision having 40 feet between every retail building, all you will see is barren wall that looks like dead alley space. And that, if you go through a lot of towns, that is what you'll actually see. So I think this is possible because of the zoning master plan.
And how does putting in another hotel here create cascading effects in terms of what else may go in the, I mean, there aren't a lot of open spaces anymore, but do you see any cascading effects, changes in terms of other uses of the property that aren't currently being realized, because now we're talking about two?
Well, we don't have a lot left, actually. We have two more building sites, Building K and Building J. J, I think we're kind of saving really for future office or possibly something like a senior care or something that might be compatible. We're not allowed to do housing under our current zoning. It could be, but we haven't ever tried to approach that subject. So I think for us, we're kind of pretty geared on our critical mass needs to be a commercial building where K is. And in fact, where these hotels work well for us is that the area has a lot of commercial stuff, both office across the street and what have you, residential and institutional, that they get to benefit from that. We don't need to bring them over to the center. So you get some synergy just inherently that the whole quarter is starved for good rooms. You know, my kids,
Excuse me.
you know, played at, actually I kind of probably pissed off my, your neighboring communities when I put a Go Milton sign for my kids who wanted to go play Groton one day, but that was probably a big mistake, by the way. But it was all in good fun, but it's really interesting because I've kept in touch with some of the athletic directors, and they love the fact that they can have a staff meeting here, or they can bring the parents who come here can stay close by when, you know, Groton does its lacrosse summer camps. Same thing even with most of the summer programs. It's pretty popular, I think. And I've never asked them if that's true or not, but everyone I've talked to in that youth group seems to be very excited that there's more rooms because they can't find them today.
Well, Sam, since you're here, and since all of us, if we're walking around town, invariably run into questions about the point that we don't have answers to, I hope you'll allow me to ask the crowd if there's anyone. Here's your chance. Sam Parker's in town. If you have any questions about the
I'm actually
point.
here all the time.
Yeah. Richard.
In this new hotel, can we look at using clapboard on the outside as opposed to masonry brick? And, you know, more appointments like peak roofs and so forth.
Let me, if I could just, because
Yeah, this is not a planning board hearing, so
No,
feel free to.
It's interesting because we've been toying around with this juxtaposition of different shapes that work well. So some buildings, you know, are more techy because I don't know if you recall, Richard, from when you were in earlier, when we were kind of gearing up the whole design criteria, we went through a lot of exercise, and the ability to have some buildings that are, you know, gabled New England and some that look more techy IBM. So it's kind of a balancing act. I've discovered that I'm really lousy at choosing it. So I'm much better at letting the architects do it and then telling them, hey, this is great or this isn't great. In this particular case, I'm not familiar with, we haven't got to the point where they've shown us representations of what the building will look like. I just know Peachy does a pretty good job as a general rule.
I'm sure it'll be great.
I mean, you know, like the Marriott, if you go into it, it's really quite, and I don't mean to pump them up here, I'm always amazed that it feels almost, it feels very techy inside. It's not like your, you know, banker, you know, wood, typical courtyard, right? It's a much techier one that fits, in my mind, IBM, and the fact that this is the think belt. This isn't, you know, just, this is like a think belt, you know, area, a lot of high-tech employment.
That's a great answer.
Yeah, any other comments or questions? Gino, all right.
You're gonna give me 2 minutes? Okay, Gino Ferrone, I'm chairman of the Board of Health. Does your company anticipate when you build it, the hotel, your system will be able to sustain, or you're gonna be able to connect it with the sewage treatment that the town is trying to get it through?
We're in discussions.
That's good. We obviously would like if, you know, we tend to defer to, if you want us to participate, we're happy to participate. If you want us to stay off, we're happy to stay off. Our biggest issue right now is we're we're building the capacity for our development.
Because I don't think your system is gonna be able to hold it.
Gino, let me just say this, Sam's been very cooperative, and we are in discussions. That's probably all we ought to say at this point.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your giving us an update here. If there's anything else, Chuck?
I'm just gonna throw something at you, just looking at that Building J, and looking at all the parking you have at Building J, and talking about hockey rinks, I don't know if that's even on the radar. I know that one point in time, there was some discussion, whether it was rumor or hearsay, but just throwing it out there. You don't
It's a
necessarily
great
have to
thought.
respond,
I
but
mean, I don't mind even responding, because we think about that a lot. For us, bringing, a lot of traditional developers of retail and commercial are against having kids with skateboards and skates because they think they don't shop. We're a little different. All of our centers are very family-oriented. So for us, we've been exploring the ability to do it. The problem is we don't operate those ourselves. So if the town wanted to do something like that, we could definitely look at the economics of it. There's some people who provide,
FMC, one of the management
Correct.
companies, sure.
But it's not something I'm familiar with, other than I think there's a demand for it. And yeah, I mean, clearly, when we did the temporary one, it was a huge success. And we would like to get back into the sort of the Harvest Festival, because I think that's a nice time of year. Of course, I'm not sure we have room to launch all the fireworks we did 3 years ago. So that may be the bigger challenge. I'll have to go across the street to IBM and use their parking lot or something. But it's something that's of interest. I know Parati and some of the other, I think Peter or some of the other former members of the planning board had some interest in doing fields and rinks and things. And it's just a matter of if it makes economic sense, we can do it.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all. Good luck.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. I'm just going to update the crowd. If you're coming for some of the items later on the agenda, for instance, the adult use marijuana, we're about an hour behind schedule. It's been a very productive night, but it's been a very dense and so we're moving on to topic number 7 right now, Littleton Commons Smart Sewer. Opt in, opt out. We'll begin in a moment. I guess probably the crowd's decided it's going to take a break anyway. So.
And I have to recuse myself.
Right. Yeah, it's already, you've already addressed that before. Corey, Ken, how are you guys?
How are you?
Good. I was fine, but I'm surrounded by so many sick people. I'm starting to feel sick myself right now.
I think we're getting to that time of year.
I've already thought I already went through it. As long as it's out of my system before I go to St. Martin, no.
Oh, yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, no, you gave me all the answers. So it's good. Thank you.
Nice to see you. I thought that was you sitting back there.
Can I just sneak out
Huh?
I said, can I just sneak out while everybody's up and around?
Yeah, actually, you could. I mean, you're familiar, you're familiar with all this.
No, I feel like I should be here for this.
That's true. Who knows where a curveball might come out of the crowd.
That's a second reason
Right,
to get out the
yeah,
door.
exactly.
Right. Steve, if we had to pick a night where we would fill up the agenda for you to get a primer on everything going on in town, you're getting it.
That's why I came.
Just we'll wait for Chuck to get back in there and then we'll get going. How you doing, Chris?
Good, how are you?
Good.
But Chris is excited to see 8 o'clock sewer update.
I'm just ecstatic. And I even came in 20 minutes late, and I was like, oh, it could have been an hour.
Yes, you could have.
That's okay.
You appreciate your optimism, though.
Yeah.
Only 20 minutes late.
Okay, well, as on the agenda we indicated earlier, the Littleton Commons Smart Sewer, we have our Our engineering team from Weston and Sampson, Kent Nichols and Corey Rapucci, back with us. I think we probably last met with you, what, December? Is that right? Yeah, and a very productive month or two since then to follow up on details that were authorized by the funding article success at the fall town meeting, and we've got some substantive updates to provide the town with, and with that, I guess I'll just turn it over to you guys, and do you need Anthony to move that along? You have control over your own?
Doing it.
Okay, all right.
So, thank you very much. Here to give you a general update as we prep to move forward with some items that need to be addressed prior to the May town meeting. So tonight, we're going to talk about a few different items: the proposed service area for the project, the opt-in, opt-out process, estimated costs to the property owners, timeline up until town meeting, and then we'll have time to go over any questions the public may have.
Okay, and I would add, too, that with this come hope that the board will address, do we have motions we're going to?
There are three motions that were submitted that.
Just dependent on the discussion, huh? You do have them there somewhere?
Yeah, at
Okay.
the end.
Terrific, sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no problem. So basically, what we have on the screen right now is a revised service area for the project as a whole. Different than prior version of the map, the little inset basically looks at the currently envisioned Quirk location and the groundwater discharge field at the high school. We basically took the prior project area map and through some coordination with the committee, discussed the opt-in, opt-out process. So we're setting the boundaries for the limits of the project, and we basically we went through and we sent out some questionnaires about people, whether they wanted to be in or out of the project. But now we're at a point in time where we want to get, a more finalized answer. People will have more information. So we've re-expanded the project limits to take out the people that kind of initiated some disinterest in the project, just to give them another chance to look at it and really understand the project and decide if they want to opt in. So it's the same map, just filled in a little bit more with basically properties going to be able to opt in or out of the project at this point in time. There's two different colored parcels up top, IBM and The Point. They currently have their own treatment plant systems on site that service their needs, treat their wastewater to a high degree, and remove nitrogen. So they're going to be handled a little different because they are under the jurisdiction of DEP right now for their treatment processes. So looking at that map, we have a breakdown table of the properties that are being served. So there are 7 town-owned parcels, 154 single-family residential, 18 two-family residential, 3 three-family, 8 apartment condos, 4 developable residential land parcels, 2 child care facilities, 3 charitable properties. Those are 2 churches and a parcel on Jennifer, 16 mixed use, 45 commercial, 17 industrial, and 2 developable industrial lands, which basically gives you almost 280 parcels within the surface area, which will get trimmed down through the opt-in, opt-out process. And then this is just a general listing of the streets that are included within the project area. We won't go through all of them, but there are approximate range of the numbers of addresses that are included in the proposed surface area. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the opt-in, opt-out process. And this basically, there are 3 options for property
If I can
owners.
just interrupt, for the folks that may be ingesting this information and finding it too quick to follow, it's all available online at the Selectmen's website.
It's included in the packet.
Yeah, it's included in the packet at the Selectmen's page on the website.
Have we gotten this on the sewer website?
No, but we'll upload this
Okay.
tomorrow, now that it's been presented.
Thank you.
I will point out that the package that was in your packet
Yes.
from last week, some of these numbers went up or down by 1 or
Right.
2 numbers. You'll see, that's the one thing that's a little different in this one, is the numbers in that, particularly in this table that we just showed you, are still kind of being refined last week, so you'll see some small movement in those, but
We didn't even have that
it's just
slide today.
refinement.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was something in there. Ken, will you just make sure you send Chris and I that updated? so we
Yeah,
can-
you'll get the updated one.
Thank you.
The website. So the three options that we're going to discuss are the property that's in the sewer district and is going to connect to the sewer. Second option is in the sewer district and plans to defer connection until a later point in time. And then opt out, which is a permanent exclusion from the sewer district.
So, as we've been talking about the project for quite a while, the plan all along was to give as much support to the project as we can, yet give some flexibility to the folks who we think would make sense to opt out of the project. And in the end, from the exploration that we've done, the discussions we've done, it's pretty clear that the focus here is on residential parcels, as far as folks who want to opt out, or potentially want to opt out. And the thinking of that, you know, kind of makes sense with the general concept of the project, because the concept of the project has been to focus on the common and try to address a need for some economic development, but also get some solutions to on-site constraints from Title V systems. And consistent with that, we basically have separated these into two groups. The first group of parcels is project area parcels that we think should just be included in the project area. And there's really only, as Corey just walked through the three choices, there's only two choices for these types of parcels. The two choices are they would be in the district and they would connect immediately, or they would be in the district and they would potentially defer connection for a number of reasons. We'll talk about those in a little bit. This is the vast majority of the parcels that we've targeted, and it includes those core commercial industrial parcels. It also happens to include the town parcels, because the town parcels that we've talked about are already in the mix. It does include the mixed-use parcels, and it includes the multifamily residential. And basically, at this point in time, we've drawn the line at two-family and single-family as the base residential, and anything larger than that is multifamily. In this category, the option is essentially these parcels are in the sewer district. They'll be given notification and information to that effect, and to some degree, a number of these may have an option to actually defer their connection. However, they will all be included in the project area. Our vision at this point in time is the way we will proceed with the opt-in, opt-out process. We'll be putting together a packet. That information packet that will go out to these folks will include very much the things you've just seen, the maps, the parcel list, to let people know kind of what's out there. A lot of that information that's on the website. Some overview of the project area and an FAQ sheet that'll answer some questions. Primarily, the thing that we're interested in with these folks is to get them updated financial information on the project as best we can at this point in time. In contrast, approximately 175 of the parcels that we've talked about fall into the single and two-family residential categories, with the exception that 3 of those are either church or nonprofit organization properties. In order to protect the interests of the church and the nonprofit organizations, the one nonprofit that's not a church actually happens to be in the middle of a residential neighborhood where everyone's going to get the opt-in, opt-out opportunity anyways. So in this category, there's 3 choices essentially for these folks. They will be given the choice to be in the district with immediate connection, be in the district potentially if they have an opportunity to defer. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But in particular for these ones, these 175 parcels are the ones that will be given an opportunity to make an opt-out decision. And that is that they will be allowed to exclude themselves from the district over time. Again, we recognize that even though we've been talking about this for a couple of years in pretty good detail now, there's still a need to get more information out. So in addition to the things that are in the packet for the other folks, the commercial properties, there's going to be some better supporting information provided to these folks that need to make a decision. And part of that supporting information that's going to be provided is an application process that explains to them, okay, here's the information you've got if you're in the process, what you have to do, but also what do you have to physically do to opt out. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So the choices that are going to be made for folks, virtually everybody has the option to select option 1. The folks who are automatically in the system, this is our default. The assumption is, you know, all the different property types are eligible. You're going to get the notification. You'd need to do nothing if you get the notification and you decide that you're interested in being in the district and you're going to stay in. Literally, all we're doing is notifying people essentially that they're in the district. This is where we hope a lot of folks will be, and by virtue of the commercial industrial properties, this is where we expect to, and mixed use and other folks, this is where we expect to have a lot of parcels in the mix. Slightly different would be if you want to be in the sewer district, but you expect to defer a sewer connection. Again, this option is open to most folks. The technical method by which we allow people to defer sewer connection needs some refinement. And so we've held this criteria in the process because we want people to know that as of right now, it is possible that you would be in the district but not necessarily connect immediately. And some of the technical details by which we allow this, we recommend we work out a little bit with a little bit of further discussion. In particular, I think Gino was here. Gino's still here. So we need to do some discussion with the Board of Health in particular. And that's one of the more important things, because one of the methodologies that we use to get people to connect, and whether it's important for them to connect initially or to be able to defer that connection, is how functional their septic system is, how well that septic system pairs with the protection of the environment and the protection of public health. Therefore, it becomes a really important subject for us to have common vision and common ground with the way the Board of Health sees this issue. So in this case, this Category 2 needs a little bit more refinement. The good news is, at this point in time, there really isn't a lot of difference between Category 1 and Category 2. For both parts, you'll be in the district. For both parts, you will actually have the same cost exposure because you're going to have the betterment issue. The main issue that's going to come up for deferring connections is most likely going to come down to how functional your current septic system is and whether or not we come to an agreement that it's important for the public health or the environment or other important compelling public and town reasons why these properties need to be connected immediately. So the most important category that we have, go ahead, Chase.
I wanted to clarify immediately here, though, because I think because there's so much information going around for the public, immediately doesn't mean the moment the first piece of pipe goes in the ground. We're talking about a project that's phased incrementally and rolls out in different areas of town in very deliberate ways. And so immediately means different things for different people depending on where they are and what phase of the project they would be connected to. And that's part of the information that will be conveyed to folks, is where their property sits in terms of the expected phasing. So even immediately doesn't mean day one necessary.
And that's an important distinction, Chase. The second part of that equation is some of this is still going to be subject to decision-making that you'll do after you decide to move forward with the project. If town meeting adopts the project, there's a lot more policy pieces to put in place. And one of those policy pieces will be, as I said, we recommend some joint discussions with the Board of Health. But one of those things will be the policy of how long folks do have to connect if we want to get them connected up, and what might be important area by area for that. So there's a lot of subjectivity, you're right, to the terms when we say that. So the big thing we want to talk about really in the opt-in, opt-out process is the folks who have the choice to opt out of the process. And we've always, all along, we've talked about this as an opt-in, opt-out process, but essentially it's really an opt-out process for a number of properties. You can opt out. You're going to be given the opportunity, if you're a residential home, if you're a single-family or two-family residential home, or one of those nonprofit properties, you're going to be given the opportunity to opt out. Our hope is that these folks will see the value in the project and will select to be in one of the earlier categories, but they have the potential to opt out. At this point in time, this is how we've brought the project through all the financial planning to date. We've used the questionnaire that Chris and the Highway Department put together and sought out information from folks. We used the feedback from that, the feedback from public meetings. We kind of tried to do our best to use some judgment to say, okay, if a lot of these folks continue to opt out and we take pockets out, what do the financials of the project look like? So the financial model that we have right now is based on a good number of properties opting out. But as Corey said, now we're back to the offer. And as we've said in all the meetings, the offer gets extended to everybody out to the outer limits of where we're going to be, to try to get everybody back into the mix again, and to give everyone one more chance to say where they want to be. The process will go forward, as we said. We expect to send out a packet to folks. They're going to be briefed on what their options are. We're going to answer a lot of questions. We're going to have a bunch of FAQ. We distributed, I think, in your packet, some of the questions for the FAQ. We've got the answers starting to cobble together for that, but one reason we really want to get feedback from you on the questions first, because we didn't want to go through the wordsmithing of the answers yet. We really want to get into the questions that are key for folks. Those things are critical. The other thing that's critical for these folks that are going to have to make this decision is some type of support. And we talked about this in the past couple of meetings, the last Selectmen's meeting that we were here for in December. We talked about the idea of having some open house type Q&A sessions where folks can come in and have some one-on-one discussion with staff, with ourselves, with the staff, and with others who can help answer questions, really in kind of a calm and deliberative method. We also talked about more of a presentation style outreach, where people could come and sit in the audience and listen to what we think they need to know and hear group questions being answered, similar to what we've done in the past for public meetings. Some combination of those is what we currently expect to do, understanding that the people who need to make this decision need to be properly informed. Right now, what we expect has to happen is if you are in the category where you're going to get the opportunity to opt out, you're going to get this packet and you're going to have a certain amount of time. At this point in time, we're recommending a period of 45 days to make a decision that you want to opt out of the project. If you do that, you will have to fill out an application with some information on it that we want and get it returned back to the town. We will use that information to help us further refine the information we've generated before so that it is most up to date for town meeting. We will not necessarily be locked down in where that is for a couple of reasons. One is because there's going to be an opportunity for some final changes to that. Probably the biggest and the most challenging piece of this is how do we allow people to opt out, yet make sure that they have some certainty that that decision is reasonable for them, based on how their property exists. And the challenge of doing this is pretty commonly captured right now in practice with the execution of an inspection of their Title V, their septic system. This is something that happens commonly when properties change hands. If you are buying or selling a property, the bank usually requires you to get a Title V inspection to make sure that people know whether you have a functional septic system and where that's going to be. At this point in time, we're recommending that everybody who is going to make the opt-out decision, they don't want to be in the sewer process, execute this particularly for their own interest, to make sure that they've made a good, well-advised decision and they have a reasonable expectation that they could probably survive on their septic system going forward into the future. There's a second benefit to having this inspection done, and that inspection, the benefit of that inspection is the town now has the ability to know that it's not likely that that person that just opted out may have a property change hands or a change of heart, and in a couple of years come back and ask to be let back into a system that we've already gone through the process of permanently excluding that property from. So it's fairly critical from both standpoints, we feel, that you need to have some type of documentation. At this point in time, what we expect this opt-out category to do is, one, the people are going to get this form, they're going to have a certain amount of time to return this form and say, I don't want to be in. I've done this, and I've done this, I've thought about this, I think I've made a good decision on my property, I want out, they send it back to us. What we're recommending is we give a period of time beyond that time that that form goes in for them to then submit a Title V septic system inspection that backs that decision up. Right now, our recommendation is that that take the form of probably 60 days additional beyond that decision-making period, to give people plenty of time to get that work done without a time constraint. It doesn't necessarily hurt the town to give them time to make that decision, because We're going to then make the most conservative decision we can on the financial package as we go to town meeting. Worst case from our end is we feel that one or two of those properties may get the Title V inspection back and decide, you know what, I take it back, I don't want to opt out. I'm back into the system. Adding those properties back in at a later time is actually usually, and to this point, we've not seen a situation where it doesn't work out beneficially from a financial standpoint for the overall package. So we feel like this is a very safe approach to take. Go ahead, Chase.
I think now is the appropriate time to talk about the sewer district and why opting out and then coming back in is not a trivial process, or is that something that you're going to touch on at a later point? Folks have asked that question a lot, and I've engaged with you enough that I really should have posed this before this point to make sure you were prepared, but I think folks think that it's just the town saying, drawing an arbitrary boundary, and later on we can change that boundary, when in fact it requires an act of the legislature. So I want to get that on your radar as something that we should address, whether it's here at some point.
And again, this is why we want a good decision made, because we put the words up here, permanent exclusion from the sewer district, because essentially that's what's going to happen. What's going to happen for the properties that opt out, and we agree, they submit an application, we see no reason why they shouldn't opt out, because they can provide documentation that they have a functional septic system. And there are some instances where we may not require a new Title V inspection. For instance, if they got a brand-new system. If one was just built and approved by the Board of Health recently, probably no reason to make them go back through that process again really quickly. It's important that we have that information, because we are going to exactly do what you've just said. We're going to draw a district that's going to have holes in it. And when we take that district, we're going to take it to town meeting, we're going to get home rule petition with the help of, and I don't know if we introduced Jenny Merrill from your town legal counsel here tonight with us, who has been helpful to this process, and will probably be doing a lot of the legwork as we make sure that this thing passes legal muster. But one of the real challenges of this is to write a home rule petition that allows Littleton to do the things you need to do and get that adopted at town meeting, because we then need to translate that into an act that will be done before the Massachusetts legislature. And again, your legal counsel, Jenny, will work on that package. And that becomes a critical underpinning of your entire project. Once that's done, as you've said, Chase, this is drawn such that those properties aren't just not participating, they're out, such that if they called you in a year and said, oh, by the way, my septic system's failing, I want to come back in, they can't come in. You've actually excluded them from the district. And that's consistent with what we've been telling people all along in the public meetings, but it's also worthy of repeating a few times so people actually get it, that this is not a, this in this case is not a deferring your connection. This is you won't be connected to the system.
And so if I understand everything correctly, and I realize I may be oversimplifying this just a touch, but per state law, you draw a sewer district, and whatever you draw, whoever's in has got to connect. So our decision node, the town's decision node in terms of opting in and opting out, is actually in how we draw this box. And it could be Swiss cheese. You know, if there's a hole in the middle and you're not part of the district, that's fine. But once we've drawn the district and we've petitioned the legislature, that's the box. And whatever the box is, now those folks do need to connect, because state law requires whoever's in the district to ultimately connect. So that's fundamentally why, and I'm not saying this for your benefit or Jenny's benefit, mostly I'm just looking for nodding heads to make sure I'm not completely out to lunch here. That's why the idea of opting out and then coming back in later is not a trivial thing. And it's why we're putting so much time and energy into making sure folks know what their options are, particularly the residences, know what their options are and take this opt-out decision very, very seriously, because there's, once that act goes through, there's very little recourse for us short of another act of the legislature.
And it's important to note the difference between what you're trying to do with the smart sewer program and what is traditionally done. What is traditionally done on these projects doesn't require home rule petition, doesn't require an act of the legislature, because what it is you run a section of sewer down the street, and everyone who fronts on that section of sewer is billed the betterment, and everyone has the potential to be required to connect in, and they have no option. And the reason that that's done that way is because that's the way the mass betterment laws basically allow you to do it. Someone's property is instantly bettered by having a sewer in front of their property that they're allowed to connect into. So this is a very different way to do it. It's been done a couple times in the state of Massachusetts, but not very often, and it is very specific to what you've established as a vision for the town of Littleton's sewer system.
I'm sorry I forced you on that digression, but I wanted to emphasize what that opt-out entails.
So just one more quick note on the Title V systems. Because a good part of when we sewer is about protecting the public health and the environment, we always want to think a little bit more about how best to do this. There is no guarantee necessarily if somebody gets a Title V inspection that their septic system won't fail. But what we're trying to drive away from by getting Title V system inspections done, we're trying to drive away from the concept that somebody might just find it convenient to not want to know about their septic system today, and then create a problem tomorrow, not necessarily for the town, but for themselves, that the town now becomes obligated to try to help in because of a protection of the public health or protection of the environment issue. And I think in this way, it actually makes a lot of logical sense to keep this component in. It's a hard thing. I mean, it's a step that people are going to have to take, but devoid of this, I think we're limited in how we can take reasonable actions and how much we can expect people to have a good informed decision when they go to opt out. So this seems to be probably one of the best approaches to this. There are obviously going to be some exceptions, I mentioned before. If you've got a brand new system, there's not going to be a need to inspect it. It's going to have a recent set of approvals from the Board of Health. The other one is, if you don't have a system, if your land's undeveloped, obviously, we don't expect you to do any of that. So the reason that we want to establish this so quickly is because we want to have good numbers for town meeting. So we wanted to take a little bit of time to just remind everybody of what we've been talking about. These numbers in front of you have not principally changed since last, gosh, what was it, September that we were at the public meeting, prior to town meeting in the fall. They're essentially the same. Our view is these will change probably one more time slightly before we go out to the opt-in, opt-out process, and the main reason they'll change a little bit is we're currently in the process of doing one more kind of time value of money update for costs to make sure that your budget is tuned up just enough that we can go
Borrowing
to town
piece of
meeting.
it?
Both the borrowing, Paul, but also inflation, tracking inflation, project inflation costs. We track these using the engineering news record construction cost indices, and we marker those. Our numbers to date have been January 2019 numbers essentially now, but we usually reflect those back up a little bit into the future to try to keep pace with the fact that the first of this job won't be bid until this December if things go well. So
These numbers are also predicated on the facility being at the DPW property and any incremental cost associated with changing that location is
And-
not captured here.
Right,
Is that
absolutely. At the facility being at the DPW location and the groundwater discharge being at the high school fields, and the components that we've spoken about before within the project costs, and the idea that the folks, based on the questionnaire that we did, the folks that had said before they intended to opt out, do indeed opt out, and we take a good number of the folks that we've actually invited to be in the system back out of the system again. So we hope that that makes it a fairly conservative set of numbers, or at least as close to down the middle of the alley as we can throw these, to make sure that we can give people really good information to make these decisions. Because that's really, at the end of the day, if we want people to make an important decision, the better information we give them, the better they can make that decision. So just to recap, the second column here, if you're a typical single-family residential unit, we use the term EDU, it stands for equivalent dwelling unit. Essentially, betterments are calculated this way. And we established a targeted betterment assessment of $23,000 per EDU. Most folks, we think, will apportion that over time, so that what you see at the top of the betterment assessment column is $1,460 plus minus. And that $1,460 is the average over an annual 20-year payment period. You pay that once a year You can apportion it, it'll get paid back through your tax bills. The number actually changes a little bit each year because you pay an equal amount on principal. It starts a little higher, drops a little lower. You have the option of paying the $23,000 in lump at the front and not paying interest. That if you do the math, the 1460 times 20 is actually quite a bit higher than the 23 because it's got some interest in it. The only good news here we can offer is that the town expects right now to borrow at a very affordable interest rate under the State Revolving Fund Loan Program. We, at the end of December, we were notified by the Mass DEP that we've been, the project was identified on their intended use plan for the coming year, so that's one of the big steps we need to make sure that we can tap that low-interest loan. So right now, we've added a small amount of administrative fee and some budgeted money for short-term borrowing, and that interest rate is running, I think, between 2.5% and 3%. Which is very affordable rate if we can offer that to folks who would go to apportion those costs. The second cost that comes into play for folks is $1,500 plus minus. This is a number that will be actually selected by us. It's a sewer connection fee. It's a one-time charge that will be charged to folks who connect to the system. That may be, by election of the town, go up or down a little bit, but we've targeted a pretty good $1,500 for a residential connection. The third number is probably the most variable of these, and that is sewer user charges. These are based on your water use. We'll share metering information with the Littleton Water Department, and we'll bill folks based on what we expect their average water use will be. Typically, bills get sent quarterly. This $1,300 is representative of what we anticipate a typical single-family home will use over a 12-month period. So that's a year's worth of bills, as I said, probably broken into four quarterly bills. And then the last one is individual properties, when they connect, will be required to pay for the physical connection work on their parcel. The town will build the sewers in the street. The property owner will be responsible for building the physical connections, connecting up to his or her own plumbing on their property. And as we said, these are a little rough, but right now we anticipate something 5,000 to 8,000 is a number we've seen pretty typically for residential properties. Smaller, if you have a bigger property or a two-family, you can see the next column just kind of gives you twice those and kind of tells you about where we think those numbers are going to be. User charges tend to go a little bit higher because we have a graded user charge system proposed right now, such that if you use a lot more water, you'll pay a slightly higher rate.
Ken, I know there's variations there, but just for people to get a ballpark on what some of the commercial properties, how many EDUs are those?
So, great question, Paul, and that's the next slide.
All right.
So what we had talked about before is, believe it or not, most of the non-residential properties come in between 1.5 and 2.5 or so EDUs. Because we've looked at each individual property. So pretty typically, the typical commercial property that we're serving is essentially 2 EDUs. So this first column on this non-residential chart, which is, if you look back, I mean, no different. We're charging the same rates for the residential and commercial here with probably one small exception. And the small exception is the connection fee right now that we've proposed is a flat $3,000 for commercial versus the $1,500 for residential. So if you look, it's, again, 223,000s are 46,000. If you apportion it over time, something around 2,900 a year, paid off over 20 years, and then that number goes away. The connection fee, one time, 3,000. Annual user charges, again, billed quarterly, estimate somewhere on the order of 2,900, assuming that that's how much water you use. And then a little bit higher than the residential cost to do some on-lot connection, mostly based on the assumption that those are going to be slightly larger lots. And then we threw in there's a handful of commercial properties that right now look like they're a little larger. There's only a small number that exceed 4 EDUs, but there's a good number that are in the 3, 4, 5 EDU range. So this is, the second column just gives you a sense of if you are 4 EDUs, what you might pay. We do expect that we can give better information on individual properties to folks, and we have done this in the past at some of our Q&A sessions. I do expect that when we do our open houses, we'll have a calculator with us, and we'll be able to actually run some numbers for individual folks if they want to kind of get a sense of what about my own specific property.
And what they would principally need to have you do that exercise is water usage, right?
Yeah, we'd need to know something about the size of their property, water use. We can actually estimate some of those things for them too. So I think we'll be pretty well equipped to help people make some base calculations.
And at what point can we
Where they discharge now.
start to sort some of those questions out for potential folks? The reason I ask that is that, let's take a church, for example, right? It's not just a single decision-making body, that needs to get into action. So not only do they need to understand, it's not just an obvious one EDU calculation, but now there's an organization that needs to come together to make a collective decision.
Right.
So the sooner we can put that kind of information in their hand, even how many EDUs are you, right? If I have a 3-bedroom home, I can guess that. I don't know what to tell someone who runs a business, who is involved with a church, and so on. Can we start to get that moving forward sooner rather than later?
And we actually have generated a lot of that information for the purposes of modeling everything to date.
Okay.
We have a pretty good database. Part of that database was in the tables that were distributed to you in your packet, which is just a property list, but it has some supplemental information we've generated. That packet was kind of color-coded by use, so that you'd have a better sense of what all those uses are. But in addition, in that same spreadsheet, we have information on the square footage of buildings, and, what the developed costs are, and how big the lots were, and how many dwelling units are on there if it's a residential property. So the last thing I want to talk about is just relating, principally, relating back each of these costs to that opt-in, opt-out decision that we talked about. And as I said, there's 3 categories we're trying to place folks in. Opt-in, connect immediately. If you opt in and you connect, you'll be charged the betterment, you'll have to retire the betterment cost, you'll have to pay the sewer connection fee right up front, and you'll be paying the annual user fees right off the bat. You'll also obviously have to pay to connect. Opt-in and defer connection, if we have properties who are in the sewer area but they do not connect immediately, we will actually have the potential of having folks who will pay the betterment, but not necessarily right away pay the physical connection cost or the connection fee or the annual user charges because they won't yet be connected. And again, if you think about this for a little bit, a good example of this would be a vacant lot. The vacant lot gets great benefit from having the potential to connect to the sewer because now they don't have to build a septic if that was a constraining thing. And we don't have a lot of these, but it's a good example to use. However, eventually they're going to connect, they're going to have to pay the connection fee, start paying user charges and do it. They don't pay those right away. They're going to pay the betterment to start. And that's the principal thing we want to think about is the main difference in opt-out is the benefit that you get from opting out directly is you're not going to be bettered. That's why we will not allow eventually those folks to just change their mind and jump back into the system. Because the betterment is distributed amongst the people who benefit from the project. If we let somebody else pay the betterment for that property and then they jump back in, we've now unfairly balanced the cost of the project as well. So there's some other good, logical fairness questions that come into play with that.
And that's a standard, I would assume, throughout sewering and...
Very straightforward, right. So the reason I want to bring that up, though, is because there's one other category of deferrals that I want to talk about, which is there are some deferrals available for folks that opt into the project and would normally be bettered by the project and will be in the district. And those are deferrals available for the betterment assessments. And we actually included in your packet, there's a separate little memo that talks about what these are under Mass General laws and common practice right now. Because these are fairly common amongst a lot of places, and right to the point you just made, Paul, not new for Littleton, commonly used, but a couple of these are very straightforward. The first one is an undeveloped property. If you've got a vacant lot, you actually have the rights under the betterment laws, assuming Littleton adopts this section of the betterment laws. You have the right to allow that undeveloped property owner to not initially pay their betterment. They don't have to pay the principal up front. They can defer it over a period of time. What instead they do is they pay an interest rate, and they pay actually a higher interest rate than the betterment number retires your apportioned cost at. This is important because a lot of communities have found that they don't necessarily want to force development of undeveloped lots right away. So it gives the property owner of an undeveloped lot the chance to both be in the district and eventually benefit, but not be forced to immediately develop. It's generally found to have good value for communities, and that's why it's in the mass laws. All you have to do is adopt it. The second thing that comes into play is there's an indigent elderly homeowner provision that's already in the mass laws, and it's actually in the mass laws for taxes. If someone's got very low income capacity and they're elderly and they meet the criteria, they can actually defer their property taxes. Well, the betterment laws allow the very same thing. Somebody who doesn't have the financial wherewithal to do this. There are very specific provisions on how this gets done. Again, interest is paid in the interim until the number gets put off. In the end, it's a lien against the property so that you're securing the cost, and eventually the town will recover the costs. But what it's specifically designed to do is to not drive somebody out of their home because they've got a very high bill. And again, these are important things to remember because these are some of the things that scare folks with these types of projects.
Is there, again, questions I should have asked in our individual meetings. Is there an ability to expand that lien program a little bit? I mean, I understand that the system needs capital up front, right? If everyone defers it, then all of the capital up front is impossible to repay.
Yeah, you've already said you're not going to underwrite the job, so you don't have a project.
Right. Is there a way, though, to expand that beyond the indigent elderly homeowner exception and make it slightly more broad? Or does that break the financials in a way that either doesn't make sense, or does it start to draw arbitrary lines that are?
Number one and number two, undeveloped land devoid of structures, and the indigent elderly homeowner provisions are already written in the Mass General laws. These are not things that you can change. You either adopt these or you do not. There is a lot of discussion of whether you should have other criteria in there, and these are the subject of some home rule petitions. The challenge is, and this is one of the reasons why Jenny's really important to this process, the challenge with this is the further you wander from the mass laws, the harder it is for you to be assured that you can cleanly administer this or even get it approved. And I think our general advice is to stay close to the mass laws when you make these. I don't know, Jenny, if you want to talk to that a little bit.
Well, no, I mean, you're spot on. The farther you get from the general laws, the farther you get from anything other people have done, the more difficult it will be to pass at the legislature.
That's sufficient for me, just to.
So the third thing on this list, though, I want to point out, though, is important, because the third thing is not set in the Mass General laws, but is something that has commonly been done, because communities find over and over again that this is an important piece. If we have properties within the service area that have relatively new septic systems, that somebody just made an investment in a septic system, that's the number one thing we hear from folks when we're going to put sewers in anywhere is, gosh, 3 years ago I put in a brand new septic system, it cost me an arm and a leg. I don't want to see my investment go to waste on that. There's a good number of communities that look immediately to an exclusion to allow folks to get some beneficial use out of that investment they made in their septic system. But in your case, we don't necessarily want them to all opt out, because they may very well recognize, if they saw what it cost them to put their septic system in, they may very well recognize how hard it might be in 10 or 15 years to do that again, and if they don't have access to your sewer system that might be more beneficial financially, they want to do that.
Furthermore, it cuts against our environmental objectives.
Exactly. Right. So we actually, right now, based on discussions we've had in the past and where we are, we think you'll be interested in adopting a provision to allow some deferral for the benefit of an on-site disposal system. And this is one, because it's different from the Mass General laws, it will need a little bit of art in both the way we approach it from a home rule petition, but also in the way we get the legislative approval done. Because there's some art needed to make sure that is consistent with what other folks have done. The good news is there's a few models we can look at.
So here's one, Jenny, where we're deviating a little bit from the Mass General law, but there's enough precedent that we're comfortable we can either mimic what's been approved or modify it within our confines.
Generally, these are the things we find that will give us some tools to offer the folks who are really uneasy and would otherwise want to opt out because the betterment scares them and they have some specific reason to do that. But we can give some folks some other area to look to get a solution to their potential challenge and hopefully, again, protect the integrity of most folks still trying to look at the long term, particularly for a parcel that would benefit long term from being in the sewer system. So that was kind of the big picture on the process and the way we see it. I think the last thing I want to do is I want to walk through the timeline a little bit.
Walk briskly. Walk briskly.
We'll walk briskly. Sorry, I knew we started late, right? So we need to get the information packet out. The main thing that drives this whole timeline is town meeting. We need to get the information packet out by mid-February. We would like to schedule to have that first open house where folks can come in and ask questions, probably late February, certainly by the first week of March. In between that and the second time we do that open house, which we'd like to do on different days of the week, we'll insert a public meeting, more of a formal public meeting, with Q&A afterwards too. We expect to get all three of those, the two open houses and the public meeting done in about a 3-week period. And still get them done a couple weeks ahead of when we expect to get the opt-out forms back from folks. That deadline for the applications right now is April 1st. Pretty importantly, to give us time to finalize the service area, we need a few weeks to do that. And not just finalize the service area, but then adjust the costs as appropriate, so that when we go back to town meeting, we're actually depicting for folks the most realistic costs, not now based on the projections that we did, but now based on some hard numbers. And that's a comment we heard from folks at town meeting and at the public meetings, which is we want some harder numbers so we can really start to feel better about this. So I think the key of this is we're trying to live up to what we've heard from folks and make the project what we've said it was going to be all along. The one other date I was going to throw out here is, we expect to be at town meeting on the 6th, but if all goes well, we currently have some MassWorks funding in place that our target is to get shoveling ground on Phase 1A of the collection system in December of this year. That's pretty aggressive. We do have design money in place, and we'll be moving forward with that piece too. Assuming we can get some construction money in place this year, we would be in a potential position to put shoveling ground as early as December 2019. Finish, Chase, though, with your point, which is that's Phase 1A of 4 phases. Very clearly, we to date have said that this is spread over 6 or 8 potential years. So if you're a residential home and you're in the Phase 2B piece, right now our vision is that that project doesn't even start for another 6 years. So there's a good amount of time for folks that, don't think they necessarily want this in their neighborhood right away. We're not going to be jumping into all the neighborhoods right away. So.
Can you comment on where the Quirk site evaluation process fits into this as well?
Ask that question.
So the Quirk site evaluation process, we've done a couple of rounds of discussions with a small working group, including Paul and Chase.
And what we don't need to do is go through the whole evaluation process, but I do want folks to
We'll
know.
give it till night, yeah.
where that
That
fits
has
in.
been lost in this, it's just that's not one of the items we're prepared to act on
Yeah,
tonight.
just for backdrop,
Yeah.
we actually have gone back to the drawing board based on some feedback that you've given, plus some staff feedback. I think we're in really good shape with that. We're actually going to be looking in the next week to schedule another sit-down with the small group, walk through that with the hopes that we're ready to drop that evaluation. And the
Share it
results of
with
that
the town.
out on the town, and be able to talk about that with the
Which
public.
means reconsideration of others, of sites that were looked at before, as well as consideration of new sites.
Right.
And on a parallel track, the ongoing work with the water department to evaluate the viability of the leach field site.
Groundwater discharge site, and the discussions with the partners. I mean, you had Sam Park and the Point here today, very important partner. IBM and the Point are important, but they're a little different, as Corey said, in the mix. Those are still being discussed, and all those things, kind of, as we've said in our scheduling discussion that I came here with in December, those things have to wrap up in the next month.
Right.
For us to be in a position to be in town meeting in May.
And
we have to have an
principally,
answer to this.
for Cindy and Chuck's benefit, one of the things that we've asked Weston and Sampson to do in terms of the alternative Quirk sites is to give us an order of magnitude sense of how much alternative sites might cost to develop and incorporate into the project, right? Are we talking $50,000 $500,000 or $5 million in terms of different sites. So that's part of, I think, what you'll be prepared to discuss and come forward and evaluate.
Are we ready for questions? Okay, and I see our first question, yes.
Hi, Kristen Sabota, North State Road. I was just wondering, could we get a list of the sites that you've looked at already and that have failed and why they failed?
I mean, I think that's part of
Yeah.
what will ultimately roll out.
I was just curious as to why they failed.
Yeah, all that information will be, I think it's just, he's gonna represent the list to our internal group and go over it, we're kicking the tires on it, and then, we spoke about it at the last meeting, we need to invite the concerned neighbors of the, initially proposed site into the loop, but we need to get our act together kind of before we do it, but that should be in the next week or two.
Thank you.
Yes. Ed?
Ed Mullen, 10 Grist Mill Road. Two questions to point. So I was on the solar selection committee for preferred contractor for solar, and I'm thinking the same idea. You want to get a hard number for the Title V that the resident would be required for the opt-in or opt-out. So you get a commitment on that from a preferred contractor. And I think this can be done outside, but I think it's a hard number we could create. And then the other one would be the installation from the homeowner to the street. Who they're paying, how much they're paying, because they could go out and get 10 bids and get 10 different prices, where again, you got a commitment from a preferred contractor that says, I'm going to charge you this much for this length of pipe, and depending on the measurements, you're all going to pay roughly the same. So there's two ways I think we can get harder costs to the residents as well. Just my idea.
And in that kind of scenario, Ed, would they wouldn't have to use the preferred?
No, they can still go for 10 bids if they want, but you've got a hard commitment from at least one contractor that says, anybody from the town of Littleton that calls me to connect to this system, I'm gonna honor my commitment of this much money for a Title V, and I'm gonna honor this much money for the length of pipe that I need to install.
Can the town somehow extract itself from the liability there of recommending a contractor? That would be my
Solar
only.
selection committee, so the verbiage is there.
That sort of thing's been done before. You guys working on the communities, I assume you come up with something.
Yeah, we work with a lot of folks who are implementing projects. The only thing I would say is this is a very premature time to talk about those things. I would worry about that after you have a project through town.
But in terms of the Title V inspections, I think that's something where we could
So I
open that
would
up.
strongly recommend against the town interceding in selecting a Title V inspector for anybody. The reason we're doing the Title V inspection is not to take control of anybody's property or anybody's septic system. The reason we're doing it is to make sure that people do due diligence. We're giving them an indication of a tool that they need to use to make a good decision. The more you intercede as the town, the more we walk a dangerous path.
I see your point there, and that's why I wouldn't require them to use that, but I wouldn't be opposed to saying, here's someone that you could use, making it clear that they were working independently and that the homeowner had a choice of hiring whoever made them happy.
If I may.
Yeah, that's, again, farther down the road, there's a lot to be discussed there, but anyway.
I just want to rebut that and say that at least if you get one person with a commitment, you know what one number is going to be, because once you put the stranglehold on a neighborhood and say, everybody here needs a Title V, guess what? Market demand, price goes up, so.
Understood.
Okay. Ma'am, you.
Yeah, sorry, Tina Warren, State Road. I was just wondering about the alternate sites. They haven't all failed, right?
Oh, no, it's an analysis, and it's both objective and subjective, but to say anything's failed, that's not the right way to phrase it. It's just everything has a cost, whether it's cost and difficulty, cost in dollars and cents, those sort of things.
And that's what we'll see within the next month.
And the objective is to present the alternatives, not to, Weston and Sampson is not being tasked with validating the court site. What they're being tasked with is providing the Board of Selectmen, here are the ones that could work depending on the dollars and cents. There's some that are just gonna fundamentally fail because it's too small, it's too close to, and those will be failed and moved out, and the justification for those will be provided. We wouldn't use one that's all the way on the other side of town. 'cause that makes
We'll
no
dedicate a
sense.
whole session just to that topic as soon as we have our next go-around. And then you'll be able to get all the information in advance, kick the tires on it, ask all those questions.
Okay.
Okay, good. Other questions out there? Mr. Zeldin?
Yes, Michael Zeldin, 11 Land Street. This is a question without any numbers required, but in those towns that have established a sewer district, and if you're in the sewer district, you get connected or you have a connection opportunity. Did those what sort of financial mechanisms were made available? Are there financial mechanisms already in place or available to, shall we say, meet the financial distress of folks who suffer financial strain as a result of being in the district? I'm addressing the Swiss cheese problem. So what I'm asking is if a town or a city decides, an area decides that you're going to have a sewer district, you're in the sewer district, win or lose. But are there financial mechanisms in place to address the issues that you have brought up through this for people who are in distress as a result of being in the sewer district? If the answer is yes.
Yeah, I think the answer, Mike, is yes, although I would say that the majority of them are ones that we've talked about already. The primary one that most people find is to provide low-interest cost loans to retire costs. The single biggest thing that can be troublesome for a homeowner is borrowing money. Some homeowners don't have the means to qualify to borrow money. Other homeowners can borrow money, but they pay a high premium.
I understand.
I think the main thing we try to offer is a very low interest rate in a way, and with the betterment, in the case of the betterment, in a way that a homeowner only needs to elect to take, doesn't need to qualify for. And that's a critical component, but that's the primary methodology. We have others, we're continuing to explore others, and it's a good point, but the goal is to start with a very affordable, like I said, we're in the sub-threes interest rate right now, which is pretty hard to borrow at for this type of a thing.
And again, this is not a question that requires a numerical answer. That is, are any of the sewer districts created in such a manner that they operate as a, I'll use the word, a semi-public business? Where basically they are in the commercial, one foot in the commercial realm and the other realm in what we'll call the municipal realm, and therefore have a lot more, shall we say, financial leverage.
Yeah, like an enterprise fund.
Yes. Just want to know if they're, okay, they're out there.
Yes, we do expect all our models run these as enterprise-funded entities. The reason we do that is to make sure that they have sound financial principles, so they pay for themselves, essentially, so they're self-funding, and therefore we select enterprise funding.
You know, especially since we intend with the clerk to be in the business of
Yeah.
getting into the energy market on the selling end, we need to have that model.
But we do need to recognize too, though, that we are going to be a public, this is not a private entity, this is a public entity. It will be governed by public laws and regulations in the way we set fees from a fairness standpoint. There's a lot of things, Jenny's here, so a lot of things that we're actually, again, the protections available by the laws are there to protect consumers. And so we don't want to wander too far from those, and you start to be, when you talk about a commercially or business run, you need to be a little more sensitive to the fact that we are going to be governed by the prevailing law.
One final point that I wanted to make too, Mike, you asked about setting up programs to make it financially viable. One of the things that we haven't solved yet, but we got a great suggestion at a public info session, was the on-site connection costs, which are the responsibility of the property owner to address. And we haven't moved this ball forward, but one thing I'm really interested in trying to set up is some financing understanding with some bank who's willing to work with individual homeowners to help address those on-site costs. And I think if we as the town approach a bank and say, hey, we would like to set up this program so each one of these properties could come to you and get these loans, I think there's something there that we could put together that then further takes some of the burden off. But it's still going to be a principle that they're going to have to address. But we want to use the clout to the town as
In
much as
fact,
possible.
one of the forums we had, one of the banks, go unnamed, actually expressed some initial interest in that.
And it's just something we haven't addressed because it's a little farther down the road.
Okay. Given the importance of the subject, if there are any questions, again, specific to these topic items, appreciated, I'll take them. We do want to kind of wrap up on this and have you know that we're going to be back again on the next set of specific sewer-related subject matter, meaning the Quirk site and the related topics, but I'll take another question or two more if there are. Yep.
I just had a question. Is there a certain number of properties? Is there like, let's say only 50 properties, let's say want to opt in. Is there a certain number that won't make it successful?
Sure, good question, and I think we do know the answer to that already, but I'll let whoever wants to answer, Chris or Ken, because we did do an initial survey of the property area.
So it's not a very specific number, it's more we need to get a financial base within which we can make the project affordable, and we modeled that already. Believe it or not, the numbers we've already presented have, I forget, we had a pretty high number of folks indicate on the residential side that they might opt out.
They want to, about 75%.
So I want to say, there's something like 75 or 80, I think, that we've already modeled to essentially be out. It's a pretty high number.
Okay.
I don't know the number specifically off the top of my head, but I would say I'd be shocked if we had a significant number more folks who would now, based on a better level of information and where we are, and the financials don't look any worse than what we originally presented.
But on the flip side,
They would then go and opt out. The difference exactly, Paul, is that we've also made the decision that, all the mixed use and all the commercial properties that are the core of what we're trying to do, those are in, and the decision being made by the town is those are going to be
Well,
included.
prior to the decision, the town making that decision, because the response rate was so high, essentially. It was about 90%, right?
92%.
92%.
Basically, the project can be financially viable with just the commercial properties,
Right.
without any of the residential center.
I mean,
I guess if that answers your question.
It will get less viable financially if everybody, in theory, if everyone opted out that could, but I think the likelihood is it's going to stay about the same.
All right. Related topics? No? Okay, terrific. We'll be back probably in a couple weeks' time on the next chunk of it. Oh, actually, before we go, as we promised, there are items here that we would like the board, having been presented with this information, of course, if there's discussion, that should come first. But these are, we're not going to go forward with these assumptions unless the board has given its blessing.
Okay.
So, I'll before making the motion, the first one deals with the area map that's been adopted here. The second one is on the, what constitutes qualification for an opt-in or opt-out. And then the third one is authorization to go out and notice the property owners along the lines of what Kent described.
Okay.
Anything you want to add to that, Chase?
Only that this is the first part of the process, and it's, even though we're adopting the map now, that
Can change.
can still change.
Right.
The only thing I'm going to throw out there is, Jenny, you've looked at these and everything looks like it's
Yeah.
cool.
You might have even drafted them.
I do.
Yes. Okay, all right. I apologize, I don't know how that did not get into the packet with the other questions, but I noticed that while going through today.
Excuse me.
But it wasn't intended to drop it here, but we would appreciate the
So we need
voted
those
support on these three motions.
Three separately moved?
Yep.
3 separate? Yeah, go ahead.
Move that the board approve the area limits for the Littleton Common Smart Sewer project consistent with the map entitled Littleton Common Smart Sewer Service Area prepared by Weston and Sampson and dated January 2019, and with the parcel list presented to the board at the January 28, 2019 meeting.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made by Selectman Gerbig, seconded by Selectman DeCoste. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Move
Okay.
that the board approve the opt-in and opt-out categories within the service area as presented by Weston and Sampson at the January 28, 2019 meeting.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made by Selectman Gerbig, seconded by Selectman Napoli. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the ayes
Move
have
that
it.
the board authorize town staff and Weston and Sampson to proceed with sending opt-in, opt-out notices to property owners within the service area of the Littleton Common Smart Sewer Project.
Second.
Motion's been made by Selectman Gerbig, seconded by Selectman DeCoste. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No, the ayes have it. Terrific. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you, Jenny.
we need to remember to invite specifically those two
Absolutely.
butters. I think we've got
I reached out to them
contact.
before
You
this.
did, good, thank you.
Uh,
Ms.
Some of
Ricard
them.
and.
Yeah, I sent
Simona.
it to everyone I had in my phone on New Estate and
Right.
said some stuff associated with the Quirk
Right,
sighting.
but especially when we do the next subject matter, we want them in the room.
Yep.
Yeah,
Right.
thank you.
Yeah, in fact, I fear I overstated what would happen with the
Okay, all right. This point of the night, a little discussion about marijuana is more than welcome.
Just discussion. Just discussion.
Okay, all right, well, where we left things, we did meet, I think it was our last meeting, we had a pretty good discussion. We had planning board representation there, we had town council Chris Heap here, and we did give Chris some more input to changing criteria and process suggestions that he was going to go off and work on. The planning board, I know, I don't know if you guys have had any independent discussions since we last met on the adult use marijuana. No, but part of the reason it's on our agenda tonight is we have new information from the MMA conference that we went to, at least in terms of a presentation from a competitor law firm, as well as Anthony was diligent enough to grab some prototypes from other communities, the processes they've adopted. So I know, Chuck, you had asked that we put this back on the agenda, even though we don't have new information from Chris. But however we want to proceed, do you want to start off with any kind of question or comment, or do we want to just have Anthony present what we have in terms of new information?
You okay if I jump in?
Yeah, that's fine. You were at, Chuck was actually.
Oh, all right, I'm sorry.
Just in a
Didn't
different
realize
row, and he was there, so.
I've got a picture of Anthony in the meeting.
I was at the pool.
Yeah. That was a good meeting. in the pool.
See, it was.
Chlorine versus salt. So, the reason I want to put it on there is because there was a lot of information that was disseminated. I've attended a couple of Cannabis Control Commission meetings where they've invited the mayor from Northampton, the mayor from Holyoke, the economic development manager from Lowell, the Framingham, yeah, Thatcher Keyser is the new COO in Framingham, the Somerville planner, I think, yeah. And they've all offered up a number of different, hey guys, they've all offered, I'm sorry. You're the gavel man, I just. They all offered up their input, none of which involved an RFQ or an RFP. Most of them, some of them Framingham, got my notes. Framingham and Lowell had a task force, Haverhill, Drake, Maynard, Chelsea, Northampton, all selected based on site selection and merit. And they had people come in that were interested, and it was very similar to how we vetted applicants for the RMD a couple of years ago. And so I wanted to just further the conversation. I apologize for not being here at the last meeting. But subsequently, we did attend MMA. We did get additional information. We asked a number of questions of communities that are engaged, some communities that, actually, the city of Salem did go out to an RFQ. They've been sued by one of the aggrieved parties that was not selected. And there's potential that that's going to become a broader suit with some others that weren't selected joining the lawsuit. I've got some articles on that. If the board's interested, I can share those. And you guys would
Probably just as important to share it with Chris Heap, too.
You have, okay. So I just wanted to keep it on our radar, talk potentially about what our process is going to be. I think that keeping those two areas of focus, the site selection and merit,
as the big rocks that we should really be taking a look at when vetting. Not necessarily the sites, but, well, we can certainly vet sites. We can take a look at what our overlay district is and say, okay, that looks like a location that would be comfortable with because it's got parking, it's got this, it's got that. And, you know, it's a secure building, whatever it happens to be. We can certainly go down that route, or, you know, as people come forward, we can kind of vet the sites and then go through the kind of the interviewing process that we did with the RMDs. I'd further recommend that we, rather than all 5 of us having to be engaged in it, we set up either a task force or just a subcommittee or just a couple of us be responsible for kind of that interview process, along with maybe someone from the town administrator's office. Maybe Myron was involved previously when we did the RMD. Myself and Melissa Hebert were the members of the Board of Selectmen. I think Mark Montanari was the member of the planning board, and Keith sat in the room too. So we did those interviews, and ultimately we boiled it down to 2 applicants that came before the Board of Selectmen. We did similar to what we did tonight, similar to what we've done with other vendors. We interviewed them, and we came to a consensus.
I don't care if we do an RFQ, I'm indifferent to that, but I'm not gonna base a decision based on whether somebody gives me a warm fuzzy feeling in front of me. So whether it's an RFQ or we're simply laying out the things that we expect them to tell us, I'm good with either one, but I wanna see substantive information from people about all of the things that we're talking about putting in an RFQ. So,
Criteria.
well, not just criteria, but hard products, you know. I want to see what they plan on doing in terms of traffic control. Do you plan on mitigating that with hours? Do you plan on, you know, if you're so inclined, do a traffic study, great. You know, if you want to be bigger and you expect more traffic, fine. But we're calling it an RFQ right now, and I'm with you in that I don't care if it's a formal RFQ and we put it out and we respond to bidders, but all of the information that we talked with Chris last time is stuff that I think we need to solicit from people before we go forward with negotiating an HCA. And if that's as they come process, great, I don't care.
Yeah, I'm not hung up on what it's called either, and if there's legal pratfalls possible with that. I am interested in making sure that we have an opportunity. Sounds like what the Cannabis Control Commission is allowing communities is to have local criteria above and beyond the districts. I don't know why, I see a distinction, I guess, between this and the medical one, where I think it was envisioned that once something's cited, and that was a first in the whole genre, that it would be there forever. This is more, well, not forever, but, you know, this is more entering into just the nature of retail where licensees come and go, you know? I mean, like with liquor licenses, you award them, but a couple of years from now, that business might fall apart. So I think I anticipate a model where, you know, even though we have broader ability to set standards and ask questions, that consider it something routine where we might every couple of years have to revisit licensees and.
So did you take a look at the criteria in the packet?
So that was KP Law put together a.
Right, so if you look at
presentation.
pages 4, 5, and 6, it basically gives you 1, 2, 3, 4 sets of criteria based upon background, business information, municipal impact.
Which is all pretty
That's the merit
consistent.
side,
Which is
what I'm talking
very consistent with what we talked to Chris about during our last meeting. I think this is a great example to follow.
And furthermore, I would note here that, well, exactly there, it's stealing from KP Law. I sort of feel bad putting their slide up, but, you know, they're very much chart parallel courses. Exactly what we're talking about. What we were just talking about is more option 1, the formal RFQ process is option 2, but either one of them uses the same types of information. It's just rather than force everybody to show up at the same time, it's take them as they come.
Another approach, the city of Holyoke basically drafted their HCA, and it's not a boilerplate. There's no negotiating off of that HCA. That's their HCA. You want to do business in Holyoke, you sign this HCA.
Interesting.
No, we're not going to change that.
Right.
No, the license is not transferable.
Right. Well, the thing too is we only have 2 available licenses we're dealing with, right?
Yeah.
So we're fortunate in that regard. I mean, it's a small it's a small pool, it's Littleton, we only have so many areas where this type of business can be located that will work for our community, so.
I would also say too, I mean, I like the idea of doing that, but it's 10 o'clock, it's time to shit or get off the pot. I mean, you know, we've talked about this and we've talked about this, and
Yeah.
if we can get a Form HCA agreed upon, great.
I don't necessarily think that's the right approach, frankly, because I think each operator that
I'd like
comes
to get
before
this
us.
moving.
I know. I'll tell you, Chuck, you started off by indicating at least part of the process being a subgroup members, blah, blah, blah. I'm all for that being the mechanism for
Vetting.
No, actually not. I would like to see that be the group to give us a process proposal that we can say, okay, vote on it, vote no. I still think all licensees ought to come before the whole board. I can't think of other cases where we farm out, licensees to a subgroup. I think
The
that's
only
a,
role I could see of a subgroup is validating, they have all, this is a viable
I suppose
application.
vetting to that point. I mean, checking to see whether their business plan is correct, whether their references are true, whether the assertions they've made work, but, yeah, I feel uncomfortable saying, here, we have a licensing authority, and we're gonna delegate that authority out. I think that's an important enough function, it ought to stay with the board, but I don't have a whole lot of stake in, how the process gets designed, or as Chase just said, of doing that, follow through to, once we've established criteria and people submit their proposals, fine, go through that, but I feel uncomfortable having a finalist presented to us. I know that was the case with the other marijuana, but that was a whole different world. It's not retail, it was a medical thing that was the first time we dealt with any of this. Now, this is getting to be routine for the state. It ought to be more like other licenses, my mind, just my mind.
I like the idea of us creating the HCA and presenting it to the applicant, as opposed to having them bring one before us, and then you get the going back and forth, negotiating, and there's only 2 potential licenses available. So what if you're going to compare application to application,
Well,
or agreement to agreement? Like, why not just come up with a boilerplate?
I think that should be part of whatever this process is. I mean, if we wanted to go forward and say, here's the HCA, that's great, but I think we should still be evaluating all of the other aspects, not just, will you sign our HCA?
Oh,
Do you have a
gosh, no,
viable
no, no.
business model?
That needs to go
Oh, okay.
in line with this.
I thought you were saying, like, just
Oh,
first person
oh.
who wants to sign our HCA.
Yeah.
gets to go.
In the interest of the hour, in the interest of doing that graphic thing that Chase described a moment ago, I mean, how about we, you're invested in this issue, you've had experience with it from the get-go and show a lot of interest. Couple members of the board, go meet with a couple members of the planning board staff as necessary in council, and hammer out a proposal for us that we can, rather than, I don't know, debate these things stray items back and
Sure, yeah,
forth.
no,
There's value to a lot of it, but,
I just want to make sure we're moving forward, because
Yeah.
I think it's,
So-
the town has expressed that they want to move forward with this.
How about the next time we look at it as a board, we have a proposal from you folks? I mean, and,
And I would say start with, the work that town council
Oh,
has
yeah,
already
don't-
done.
I wouldn't
mean,
throw that out the
it's
window.
not an RFQ, but-
Yeah.
Get in the same room. I mean, a couple members of this board, a couple members of your board, Anna and Ed, and legal counsel staff as necessary, and then come back with a proposal we can vote on sooner rather than later, next month or so.
Public comment's still open. I mean, we could go punch this out.
Does that proposal include everything that we want in there from safety to parking?
I mean,
so.
I don't think it has everything.
Otherwise, we
but
change it, or we,
There were definitely some things in these additional agreements that were interesting, that we might want to
The
incorporate.
permitting process still involves the planning board.
Oh,
So
sure.
all of
Yeah,
that criteria still has to be met.
But there are things
But yeah, I mean,
outside of,
I'm
I
talking
guess
about,
broadly speaking.
someone coming in knows they have to have this, and this.
yeah.
and I think we're still not there yet. Look, for example, the town of Tingsboro, part of the commitment that they're making is even if they're a nonprofit, they agree to pay property taxes. Well, that's outside of the planning board. That's on us to sort out. So when I say I think what we've put together with Chris is a good start, I think there are still things that we need to look at putting in there like that.
Ed, do you want to input here?
Yeah, I was going to say, at our next meeting, I'll make sure it's on the agenda, and I know it'll be difficult, but I'll see if Ann and I can get appointed to the working group for
That's
draft.
presuming that the board adopts that. Is that working group idea? I mean, it works for a lot of other things, and I assume Chuck wants in, and,
If somebody else wants to, I mean, I've gone to a bunch of meetings, but it's.
you've invested a lot of time into getting it right. I know you guys have a lot on your plate, but Cindy, you're interested too, I don't know if.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to do it unless Chief
Okay.
wants to do it.
I think my plate's probably.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
He needs a little time off, he's had a busy 6 months. Huh?
I'm fine with those.
Okay, all right.
No,
All right.
if somebody,
But you guys should get us any drafts early, update us, and be inviting input. Am I
Okay.
right?
We can do that.
Cool? All right. Do we need a vote on that? Nah, we'll just designate Cindy and Chuck to go off and work with the planning board designees and whoever's necessary.
Did you want to add anything? I mean,
No, you touched upon everything.
Okay, and somebody should give Chris a heads up that we just dumped this all in his lap with 4
Right.
bosses.
There's also some really good.
Okay.
Yeah,
send that
we'll
to
touch base.
Yeah, okay, Anna, I'm sorry.
Real quick, I just wanted to add that I agree with what you all have been saying, and I had some
Okay.
written comments to what was
All right, cool.
in your packet, so I'm just going to give it to you guys, and you can use it for your own
Did you cure all those sheets?
further discussion.
Yeah, you're gonna pass along whatever it is you,
Yes.
no, I mean,
Oh, no.
Thanks a lot.
Where did, oh, the
You're right, I
hand
probably shouldn't
sanitizer's
have
still
done
back there, right?
Good.
All right, we do have an interested public here too tonight. Are you just taking this in, or do you have commentary for us?
After hearing what you have to say, is your intention then to not only give a laundry list of, here's everything we want to see in your application, but also your intention is to have a boilerplate HCA?
Perhaps.
I was just throwing that out there,
Oh,
as
okay.
another community had done that. Cindy expressed that that might be something we'd like to do.
Right.
I'm frankly, I don't think that's what Littleton should do. I think we should
Okay.
hammer on the
It's one of the
HCA.
ideas that was on the table. I think the list of criteria is a pretty consistent item. The process is kind of what,
Those criteria could dictate who we sign the HCA with, even though they don't necessarily end up being reflected in the HCA. So, for example, we evaluate 2 business plans, and we say, we think you're more viable, we'll sign the HCA with you, so.
Right, but
I
is
could
that-
see
is
how
that
they could be
H-
separate.
Sure, is that HCA already a written document? Because
It's not been constructed.
Okay. The reason why I ask is less so because of where I sit in my interest in this topic, but more so from the vantage point of an attorney. The law says to negotiate, and when a entity, a licensing board says, sign this, or you don't do business with us, that doesn't sound like a negotiation. And my concern, perhaps, is for the folks in Holyoke who will turn around and say, yeah, negotiation is not sign this or don't do business with us. So it's really less about our particular business interests and more concern about.
that's a good call,
that as
and
well.
I hope somebody remembers to ask Chris Heath, counsel, to look into that.
I don't think Holyoke's turning anybody away. They literally have stated they want to be, what do they call themselves, the cannabis capital of Massachusetts?
They got it.
But, so Jenna, maybe they provide the first draft and say, here's our draft.
They already own
And then,
heroin, now they want
You know,
cannabis
like
too?
maybe that exchange still goes on. But that's a good point.
Phone call.
Put that on TV.
You know, my other
need another hat.
thought about it as well is that
Oh.
in the
The independent's
negotiation
calling.
process, you have an opportunity to hear creative ways of going about citing and doing business in the town of Littleton. And I think that a hard boilerplate document crushes the ability to be creative and find interesting ways to have this be potentially very beneficial to the town and the people of Littleton.
I think that point actually is really interesting because it mirrors exactly what Sam Park said to
Oh,
us
I missed
when,
what he
when
said.
he was here, which is that the town put together a broad framework for the point in which he can work and meet the town's expectations while being flexible. And that really embodies exactly what you just described in a completely different context.
And if I could just, I read through the documents in the packet, the examples from the various towns, if you look at Tingsboro and compare it to the Nantucket one. Tingsboro's application process was like $15,000 and all of these incredibly huge financial burdens for a potential small business, which actually the Mass law and the CCC have said is against the rules. You can't make someone assume, an outsized financial risk. to enter I mean, this is just the first step in the licensing process, and many of the things required by the town are also required by the state, so it's work that has to be done anyway.
What was particularly galling is their demand that retailers pay the impact fee up front.
Yeah, and it's just not.
Yeah.
And
Well,
but
I'd say,
yes,
That's cute.
hopefully, you notice,
Right.
there's been very little emphasis on the financial end of it for the town here, and that would not be a Littleton thing to do, I don't think.
I agree with that, and I think that it's not Littleton, I don't see you guys extorting money from potential business owners, but I do think that if you're going to make a standard HCA, you have to think about all of the aspects.
Again, that's just one of the options they're gonna be
Yeah.
considering.
Yeah.
And that is,
If you do.
We're just, right, yeah, we need to get with the planning board and iron it out. but-
and the CCC does speak to equitable and
Yeah.
equitable practices.
Women-owned businesses and so forth.
I will say that Tingsboro had no shortage of applicants.
Really?
So just so I'm clear, so Cindy and Chuck and Anna and Ed, provided that your board says that the two of you should be the working group folks, the working group is going to specifically do what, and is there a time frame for that?
Bring back a proposal within a reasonable time, maybe a month at latest.
I would call it the process
Yeah,
that
the
we
process.
plan to follow
Okay.
for.
Licensing.
Soliciting and being
Yeah,
open
not
to
competitive.
input along the way and.
Absolutely, yeah, it's not,
I
it's
mean, we're
not
getting off the pot now.
Right.
We're off the pot?
I think that's.
Are we washing hands?
That is their mandate.
All right.
Okay, cool. And I got your email, so let me know.
Good, thank you,
Anthony,
appreciate it.
do you mind sending Anna and Ed the KP?
All right.
I think Anna looked at the packet.
Yeah, it's
It's on,
online.
yeah, it's online.
If we're okay with this topic, we have last two agenda items, public input and members' updates. Any other public input? Mr.
Mr. Public, John Q?
Okay, good. Members' updates. Now, I know members do have some things they wanted to, some members. Cindy, do you have any?
I don't.
Really? What?
No, I know.
Good.
All right, let me rephrase that. I do,
You're gonna save
but
them
I'm
for
gonna
prime
table
time?
them. I'm gonna table them for now.
Okay, all right. Chase?
I'm gonna pass for it tonight.
Okay, I'm gonna pass too. I know Chuck's got something because I'm reading his notes.
Don't be looking at my sheet. I just wanted to say, I came out to Fire and Ice on Saturday afternoon, and Alicia, Chris, the whole, Junkers Angie, and the whole Park and Rec group did a fantastic job. They called it late audible, moving it from Fay Park because of the uncertainty of the ice over to the parking lot out there, and they had a synthetic ice as a plan B. And it was really well attended. They had a coal-fired, or I think it was a coal-fired, a wood-fired pizza truck. They did raffles. They had the fire down in the ball field. They had the rink up in the parking lot. It was
Still an ice sculpture up there. Was that a deer? Is that what that is?
Yeah, I did see that. Is it a reindeer?
but it was really well done. They're a lot of fun. There was a lot of folks out. They actually had a band. Mike Berry and his band, Get Off the Grass.
Get off my lawn.
Get Off My Lawn. Yeah, whatever.
He's all over that.
Yeah, I was stuck on the last subject.
Chuck, get off the grass.
Yeah, Get Off My Lawn. They played live band. It was really good. It was very much enjoyed it, and just wanted to take my hat off and say nice job.
Thank you. Anything else?
No, I'm good.
Mr. Knox?
Just one thing, going with that, I want to thank Jimmy Donnelly for keep on taking all
Oh,
those pictures
sure.
that we can all share what actually goes on in town. He does a phenomenal job at every single town event that we have.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. The last agenda item we have is actually an executive session item. We have been in negotiations, 2 sessions, one myself once, and then Chase and I once with Steve, and we, what's your availability over the next couple of days, Steve? Before you take off, are you available, assuming we have something positive to report out tonight? I imagine Chase and I would like to get together with you sooner rather than later.
Are you looking for time to meet?
Yep, yeah, you don't have to announce it to the town through the TV, but you can,
Yeah, I got time.
you can send something, okay, great. All right. Then the purpose for going into executive session, do you have something for me to read, Anthony, or?
I'm looking it up right now. Yeah, I have
Oh, I've got it right here, actually, yeah. All right. Yep.
I move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Master General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to go into executive session to discuss strategy with respect to contract negotiations with non-union personnel and not to convene an open session thereafter.
Okay, the motion's been made by Selectman DeCoste, seconded by Selectman Knox. Any further discussion? We'll do a roll call vote. Selectman Napoli?
Aye.
Selectman Gerbig?
Aye.
Selectman DeCoste?
Aye.
Selectman Knox?
Aye.
Selectman Glavy? Aye.
Good night,
Night.
Steve.
Good night, Steve.